Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Neil Wood, Chair of the Planning Committee. Before we commence, I would like to outline the domestic arrangement for the meeting. We are not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by the way of the fire exit through the doors. At the rear of the chamber on my right. When you have left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there's anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located and use the intercom situated on the left-hand side of the doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is the public square in front of Cast, behind the fountain. I would like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded. By entering the council chamber, you accept that you'll be recorded and your images retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode. May I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press the large red button underneath the microphone and ensure the red light is illuminated. This will ensure you are recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering today. If any members of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. So we're going to pack now. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Dan Dawson. Are there any other apologies, please? What's that for? Right, thank you. Item 2, exclusion of the public and press. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest in an item of business on today's agenda? Item 4, minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 18th of November 2025. Can the minutes be moved as true and accurate record? Good. Seconded? Yep. That's agreed. Item 5, schedule applications. So the first application we're looking at is 23/02634/FULM, installation of ground-mounted photovoltaic farm with associated infrastructure, engineering works, access and landscaping of the land to the south of Barnsley Road to the east and west of Margrange Lane, Mar. Susie, the planning officer, will introduce this item. Over to you, Susie.
Thank you, Chair. Just wait for my slides to appear. There we go. So the application is being presented to committee due to a high level of public interest and a call-in request by a ward councillor. The application seeks full planning permission for a ground-mounted solar farm and associated works on a site comprising some 77 hectares of agricultural land to the south-east of the village of Mar and west of the A1M motorway. The proposed solar farm would generate up to 40 megawatts AC of energy to be exported back to the national grid and will operate for a temporary period of 40 years, after which all of the equipment will be removed and the site restored to its former use. The extent of the application site and key nearby features are shown on the above slide. They include Barnsley Road, the A635, which bounds the site to the north, and where it joins the A1M motorway at junction 37. The village of Mar, which is covered by a conservation area, joins the site to the northwest. And the conservation area includes a number of listed buildings, and the closest are indicated here. Appendix 13 of your reports also includes the conservation area boundary and all of the listed buildings within the conservation area. A public right-of-way forms the site's western boundary. Access to the site is taken from Margrange Lane, which dissects the two development parcels. Margrange Lane also provides access to Margrange Farm Shop and tea rooms, as well as several residential properties. Grange House, the residential property most affected by the proposals, is also indicated. A site visit was arranged for members of the committee ahead of today's meeting, and this took place on the morning of Thursday, the 11th of December. For the benefit of those members who were not able to attend, the following presentation will include photos taken during the site visit, as well as plans and information shown to members on site. So the following photos just show the application site and its surrounding context. So first here we have a view taken from the public right-of-way along the western boundary, looking east across the site. And from the same footpath, a view looking southeast across the site towards Margrange Farm. Here we have a view, again from that footpath, looking northeast towards listed buildings along Barnsley Road. And the application site is that ploughed field in the foreground. Here we have a view taken from Barnsley Road, looking across towards southwest and the public right-of-way at the western site boundary. And here again taken from Barnsley Road, looking southeast towards the site. You can just see the A1M motorway in the background. Here we have some images of the current site access at the junction of Barnsley Road and Margrange Lane, taken from the east and the west. And again, views looking east and west along Barnsley Road at the same point of that junction. And here we have views of Margrange Lane itself. The two fields on either side are the application site. These images are taken from just outside the entrance to Margrange Farm Shop and Tea Rooms from Margrange Lane, so looking out towards the western parcel and the eastern parcel. And here we have images. We took the committee members into the car park of Margrange Farm Shop and Tea Rooms to look out across the site. And so this is a photo taken from just outside the tea rooms. This is a photo looking northwards towards the eastern parcel from the driveway at Margrange Farm. Committee members were also invited to go to Grange House and stand on the slightly raised terrace outside the residential property there, and these photos were taken showing viewing north towards the application site. So you can see a menage there between the house and the application site, and then a line of trees at the boundary of the residential property with the application site behind. And again, an agricultural field which will be between the house and the application site. So moving on to the proposed plans. This is the proposed site layout plan. Solar panels are to be arranged in rows within the existing field boundaries, where internal field hedgerows will be retained. A 10-metre buffer is to be provided to an existing watercourse and its culvert, which crosses the eastern parcel. As well as the panel arrays, associated infrastructure will include a distribution network operator substation and a customer substation, which will be located close to the northeastern corner of the western parcel, as well as 13 transformer substations distributed across the site. Deer fencing will be erected around the perimeter with CCTV installed at intervals. Access to each parcel will be via relocated access points at Margrange Lane, close to its junction with Barnsley Road. A landscaping strategy has been submitted to support the application, and the plans were amended during the course of the application to include a large landscaping buffer to the northwest corner to provide a more open aspect to the adjacent conservation area and listed buildings. This includes a grassland meadow and pockets of native scrub and tree planting, together with hedgerow immediately adjacent to the new proposed fence. A 10-metre wide native tree and scrub belt is also proposed to the southeast boundaries adjacent to Grange House and Margrange Farm Shop and Tea Rooms to provide mitigation screening, as well as to the northern boundary adjacent to Barnsley Road to mitigate views from the highway. And gaps in the existing western boundary hedgerow are also to be infilled. So at the committee site visit on Thursday, members were shown 2 photo montage illustrations provided by the applicant as part of the submitted landscape and visual impact assessment. and these are replicated on the slides here. So each show the development as existing at year 0 and at year 15, once the proposed screening planting has had chance to grow to maturity. So these images are taken from Barnsley Road, adjacent to the conservation area. This one is adjacent to Marhall Farm on Barnsley Road. And then we have a second set of visualisations taken closer to the junction of Barnsley Road and Church Lane, also within the conservation area. So again, views as existing, views at year 0, and views at year 15 once this planting has matured. The only hedgerow to be removed as part of the proposals will be short stretches at Margrange Lane, required to facilitate the new access points and proposed junction widening, as shown in these access plans. Margrange Lane is to be widened as far as the new eastern access point. The slipway off Barnsley Road will also be enlarged. Vehicle tracking has been provided to show that HGVs can turn off the A635 into Margrange Lane and into the site without obstructing vehicles queuing on Margrange Lane to exit onto the A635. Larger vehicles will deliver and turn within the western parcel before materials are distributed to the eastern parcel using smaller vehicles. This plan shows the extent of ground matting, which will be used for vehicular areas during the construction period. The ground matting is proposed to avoid soil compaction, and this photo has been provided by the applicant for illustrative purposes. Delivery vehicles will be routed from the A1M to turn left from Barnsley Road into Margrange Lane. No construction traffic will be routed through the village of Mar. This plan shows the proposed relocation of the Mar roundabout sign and how existing trees and scrub will be pruned to maintain visibility at the junction. The following slides show the proposed infrastructure plans in more detail, including ballasting and racking techniques proposed as part of the ground impact avoidance strategy. So the panels will be ground mounted using ballast bases and will measure up to 2.65 metres at their highest point above the ground, with gaps between panel rows of between 3.2 and 8.2 metres. And here is an illustrative photo of ballasting used on other projects by the applicant to give an idea of what that would look like. Cables will be overground using ladder racking. Again, illustrative photos have been provided. The proposed deer fencing at the perimeter of the development will be up to 2 metres in height and secured to the ground with ballast footings. These plans show the transformer stations. There'll be 13 of these distributed across the site amongst the panel arrays, measuring up to 2.5 metres in height and 5.5 by 5.5 metres in area. The two substations, the distribution network operator and the customer substation, are both the same dimension. They measure 3.4 by 12.35 metres in area and up to 4.35 metres in height above the ground. And the development will have 3 phases: construction, operation and decommissioning. And the construction phase is estimated to last for approximately 32 weeks. So there are a large number of material considerations which have been taken into account in producing the recommendation before committee members today. Key issues of principle include the generation of renewable energy, development in the green belt, and the loss of agricultural land. Other considerations relate to highway safety and access arrangements, landscape and visual impact, heritage assets, including both the conservation area, listed buildings, and archaeological assets, trees on hedgerow, public rights of way, residential amenity, ecology and biodiversity net gain, social and economic impacts, flood risk and surface water drainage, the impact on the on-site watercourse and its culvert, safety and security, and land contamination. I'll defer members to the committee report for further details of the assessment against all of these matters. In terms of the green belt, at this point, I will alert members to a matter of some uncertainty as to the current correct approach to determining whether this land should be considered grey belt, where there are designated heritage assets, whereby the application of policies would provide strong reasons for restricting development, as is considered to be the case in this instance. This is detailed in the pre-committee amendments note that you've been provided with. So the difference arises from different approaches being taken in appeal decisions by the Planning Inspectorate and Secretary of State. The applicant has asserted that the approach taken by officers is not the correct one, in which case the land would be grey belt and very special circumstances would not need to exist for the development to be approved. As set out in the amendments notes, officers have taken legal advice on this matter and consider the approach applied in the report to be appropriate and reasonable. However, until further clarity is provided by way of an update to the MPPF or planning practice guidance, or clarity is provided by the courts, there is a risk that either way could be the correct approach. Nevertheless, members are advised to take this into account when they consider their decision, particularly in relation to greenbelt matters. On the basis that the site is not greybelt land and therefore constitutes inappropriate development in the greenbelt, the MPPF requires very special circumstances to exist for development to be approved. The planning balance exercise set out in the report at section 7 weighs the harms identified against the benefits and accords each the appropriate level of weight. So the harms identified, harm to the greenbelt is accorded substantial negative weight as required by the MPPF. Landscape and visual impacts are given significant negative weight due to the major to moderate adverse impacts identified at construction in year 1, reducing to moderate adverse in the longer term once planting has matured, and notable changes to the landscape character that will result. Significant negative weight is also given to the impact on the business at Margrange Farm Shop and Tea Rooms, which will principally arise out of the landscape and visual impacts of the development. Modest negative weight is also given to an identified moderate loss of residential amenity to Grange House at the southeast of the site due to glint and glare until mitigation planting is fully grown, at which point the impact would be reduced to low. Benefits of the proposal include helping to meet the identified urgent need to meet the rapid increase in the electricity demand required to meet the UK's transition to net zero and the nation's energy needs, which are afforded significant positive weight. The development would also contribute towards the Council's own declared climate change emergency, reducing dependency on fossil fuels and encouraging the transition to a low-carbon borough, also afforded significant positive weight. The scheme will deliver over 221% increase in biodiversity net gain habitat units, 52% increase in hedgerow units, and 86% net gain in watercourse units. This is significantly above the minimum required target of 10% in the local plan. This weighs significantly in favour of the application. Direct and indirect benefits to the local and Doncaster economy, including job creation and support of economic activity, diversification of agricultural activity and skills development are also afforded significant positive weight. And then finally, issues that are neutral in the planning balance, and this is because they can be satisfactorily mitigated through design, conditions, or the temporary nature of the development, include impacts associated with highways, trees and hedgerows, loss of agricultural land, drainage in the watercourse, noise, dust, vibrations, air pollution, land contamination, and heritage assets. The less than substantial harm identified to Marr Conservation Area and nearby listed buildings has been assessed on balance to be outweighed by the public benefits of the proposal, which is why it falls within the neutral category in this balance. Overall, the planning balance exercise undertaken concludes that the combined benefits of the proposal constitute the very special circumstances required by the MPPF to clearly outweigh the harm to the greenbelt and any other harms identified. This does not serve to diminish the harms identified, but rather recognises and accords with the very significant weight required to be attributed towards the generation of low carbon and renewable energy by national planning policy and ministerial statements. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report and the Section 106 legal agreement to secure a monitoring fee in regards to the delivery of biodiversity net gain. There are a number of other pre-committee amendments to draw members' attention to. First of all, we've had a number of requests to speak. Mr. Nick Ballinger will speak in opposition for up to 5 minutes. Pamela Morehouse, representing Mar Parish Council, will also speak in opposition. Ward councillors Cynthia Ransom and Oliver Blore, ward members for Sprotborough, and also Councillor Rachel Reid, member for Conisborough, will speak in opposition, sharing a slot of up to 10 minutes. We have representatives from the applicant, Lee Adams, speaking in support, and we also have Mark Harding, also from Enviromina, available to answer questions. We've had 2 late objections received from members of the public. These don't raise any new matters that haven't already been covered in the report. We've also had 2 objections withdrawn following the publication of the report. There are no changes arising from these. Grey belt status I've already mentioned to members. It's set out in more detail in the written amendments note. There's a couple of minor corrections also to draw your attention to. Firstly, relating to the relevance of NPPF paragraph 143 purpose D to the site, in that it should be attributed no relevance rather than limited relevance as currently stated in the report. There's also a correction regarding the conclusions of the supporting noise impact assessment on the impact of the development to the amenity of nearby residential dwellings. The recommended noise condition, number 28, remains appropriate to ensure residential amenity is adequately protected, and there are no changes to the conclusion of the report on this matter. And finally, we've also had additional comments from the applicant following the publication of the officer's report. The applicant disagrees with the LPA's approach to the balancing exercise in terms of the benefits of renewable energy generation, climate change and energy security. They agree that these are benefits, but they consider they should be counted separately rather than together. There may be some merit to this approach. It would serve to strengthen the officer's recommendation to approve the application, as more weight would be given to the benefits of the development. Nevertheless, there are no changes to the overall recommendation before members. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. We've received a request to speak from Nick Ballinger in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Are you there, Nick? Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission. We'll give you a warning, a minute to go, in case you you're going to run out of time. Okay. So if you'd like to start, it's over to you.
Good afternoon. There are 1,277 objection letters, mainly from local residents and customers of Margrange Farm. There is not one letter in support. Emotions are running high, and the strength of feeling is shown here today by the turnout, some of whom these people are still downstairs not being allowed in. The reasons for objection are the harms caused by the development, and we will consider these in turn. The site is in Greenbelt, and the solar farm is in appropriate development. The MPPF says that substantial weight must be attached to harm to the openness of Greenbelt. There is no doubt that the openness is severely compromised over a wide area through industrialisation, 190 acres of fields plastered with black solar panels as far as the eye can see, causing great harm. The second harm is to agricultural land. The MPPF says that where significant development of agricultural land is demonstrated to be necessary, areas of poorer quality land should be preferred to those of a higher quality. Doncaster Council and the Mayor have major concerns about solar farms' impact on food security and have declared the council's opposition to the use of BMV agricultural land. The government's agricultural land map shows that the site is very good BMV land, grade 2. Local farmers totally agree because of the wide variety of crops grown with good yields and the higher rents paid to the landowner. Enviromena's consultant carried out a full assessment on the site and claimed to find no BMV land at all. If true, this land would only be able to support a narrow range of crops with poor yields. It would most likely be used as a grass pasture land. This is clearly not the case. So the joint rural parishes and the authority separately commissioned consultants to investigate. Both were critical of the Enviromena report, pointing out the errors, and separately determined that either a significant part of the site or at least half of the site is BMV. Further work will be necessary to be more precise. The authority accepts that a good proportion of the land may indeed be BMV land. The clearest proof of the site being BMV land is the large variety of high-yield crops grown. These are potatoes, sugar beet, milling wheat, malting barley, peas, beans, and oilseed rape. Recent crop yields show high levels of up to 42% above the national average. The wheat grown on the site would produce about 1.2 million loaves of bread. None of this would be possible without BMV land. Enviromena has indicated that it has not sought alternative sites of lower quality land. Surprisingly, the authority has accepted that there are unlikely to be suitable sites of lower quality land, despite them knowing about Brodsworth Quarry, which is less than a mile away. This disused brownfield and grey belt site is 160 acres with very poor non-BMV land and is available to host a similar sized solar farm. The landowner of the quarry has told us that Enviromena is very interested in the site because of its ideal aspect and close-by grid connection offer at the former Brodsworth Colliery. Enviromena took an exclusive one-year option in April 2024 for a solar farm there. This was when the Mar Solar Farm application process was well underway. The authority, including the head of planning, is fully aware of the solar possibilities of this alternative site. The authority has had discussions with the landowner nearly a year ago and knows about the direct involvement of Enviromena. We ask the question, why has this important alternative site not been mentioned by either Enviromena or the authority?
1 minute left.
Where is the transparency and due process? This alternative site is a serious material consideration. With the UK importing nearly half of its food and given all the global uncertainty, we believe that we should not be using our agricultural land at least until all the roofs of buildings and warehouses and all the brownfield sites are used up. The Council's declared opposition to the use of agricultural land has not been mentioned nor taken account in the planning balance by the authority. In our view, Enviromena has not demonstrated the need for a solar farm to be on prime BMV land in direct conflict with the MPPF. This must weigh heavily against the proposal. And Pam will continue with further harms. Thank you.
10 seconds. Thank you. I thought you wanted Pam to talk for another 10 seconds. Right, I'll now ask the committee members if they wish to ask Mr Ballinger any questions in relation to the submission. You, Steve.
Thank you. Is the land tenanted? Do you know? You might not know, I don't know.
Which land, sorry?
The one with the application on it.
It is tenanted. It is tenanted. There's a tenant farmer who rents it from the landowner, Brodsworth Estate.
So that tenant farmer will lose his job then?
Potentially, yes.
Any more questions, committee? Okay, we've received a request to speak from Parish Councillor Pamela Morehouse from our Parish Council in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you're finished. I'll give you a minute's warning if you're still talking. Would you like to commence?
Thank you. The third harm is the landscape and visual impact. The authority's consultant, LUC, agrees that this site forms part of a high-value landscape in line with the authority's previous assessment made in 2007. Enviromena wrongly downgraded the landscape value to medium. LUC also comments that describing a development with a lifespan of 20 years as temporary is unusual because the effects will be long-term, that is more than 40 years. LUC considers the effects on the landscape of the solar farm as major moderate adverse in year one, reducing to moderate adverse in the long term, disagreeing with Enviromena's understated assessment of the impact. None of these assessments has taken into account the impact of the above-ground construction with thousands of concrete blocks and cable trays spread across the ground across the whole site. It's worth noting that the cumulative visual impacts of the solar farm, together with the existing wind farms in Mar and Hampole, clearly seen from this site, have not been evaluated. The value of landscape takes into account the openness, spatial and visual effects and other factors which add to landscape character. These include natural heritage, cultural heritage, distinctiveness, recreational value and scenic value. The change from spacious agricultural fields to an industrial size with proposed hedgerow changes and planting of tree belts in open areas in mitigation will have a massive detrimental effect on the open character of this area. Residents in the east of Mar who now have open views will see 9-foot-high solar panels mounted on concrete blocks, cable trays, fencing, 40 CCTV cameras and lighting. It will be at least 8 years before there's any concealment by hedging, which again will alter the open landscape. The anticipated 8-foot-high hedges will enclose the views of horse riders, cyclists and walkers along the bridleway. The British Horse Society has objected to these proposals and comments on how intimidating it is for horses where there are high corridors of fencing and hedges. The Campaign for the Preservation of Rural England objects to the proposal and rightly comments upon the distinctiveness of the outstanding views of the green corridor in this area when travelling along the A1. These views will be destroyed by the solar farm. In 2 previous failed appeals on proposed developments in this area and close to this site, the highly valued landscape has featured strongly in the decisions by the planning inspector. The fourth harm is heritage. Mar is a designated conservation village with 6 listed buildings. The authority's conservation officer considers that the proposal would be harmful to the setting of the conservation area and the listed buildings overlooking the solar farm, especially Mar Hall Farm. He considers that the landscaping proposals to mitigate these harms have only been half-heartedly considered, and given the long-term impact of the scheme, needs to be better designed to fit in with the context. He concludes, whilst harm are less than substantial, he would still consider that the potential harm of the scheme would not be outweighed by the perceived public benefits, and that further revision of the schemes are needed before it can be supported
1 minute.
from a heritage point of view. He states that the proposal is contrary to the local plan and NPPF. His objections appear to have been overruled by the planning officer. We must remember that this harm to the setting of Mar of this industrial landscape not only affects locals and tens of thousands of road users along the A1 and A635, but will directly impact the hundreds of thousands of visitors a year to Brodsworth Hall who are directed to travel through Mar. What a welcome to Doncaster. When the harm of the landscape and visual impact are considered along with the harm to the conservation area, we believe these harms outweigh any benefits attributed to the solar farm. Thank you.
That's closest to 5 minutes we've ever had. Right, I'll now ask the committee members if they wish to ask the councillor any questions regarding the submission. Rob?
Thanks, Chair. Pamela, as a representative from the parish council there, would you be able to describe the impact that this development could have on Mar Farm and the tea rooms there?
It's going to have a massive impact, and later our other speakers will elaborate on that.
Thank you.
Anyone else like a question? Right, we've received requests to speak from councillors Cynthia Ransom, Oliver Bloor and Rachel Reid, ward members for Sprotborough and Conisbrough, in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 10 minutes collectively. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute. Your time starts when you want to.
Thank you, Chair. The fifth harm, increased crime. Local residents and police believe a solar farm will attract even more crime to this remote area. Police say similar sites have suffered heavy thefts of solar panels and copper. Entry is gained by cutting through the fences. The police have strongly advised a 2.4 metre high, heavy-duty weld mesh fencing with security topping and CCTV cameras on poles with anti-climb spikes and site lighting. Enviromena have ignored this advice. Instead, they are wanting to use a 2 metre high deer fencing. The LPA have taken an unusual step of allowing this. Police have doubled down on their stance, warning that this site could see a rise in criminal activity. Sixth harm, risk to local businesses. Margrange Farm is a 6th-generation family-run business which started in 1936. Initially an arable farm, it has grown and diversified. It is now a sustainable business with arable farming, a pig farm, butchers, wholesale, delicatessens, farm shop and a tea shop. It employs 30 plus local people plus family. The high quality locally sourced food is mostly prepared on site. Food which is not sourced on site is sourced from around 50 small local businesses in the Yorkshire area. Margrange is exceedingly popular with around 2,000 customers per week from the Doncaster area and further afield. This facility is highly valued for shopping, social amenity and meeting places. These should be protected for customers to enjoy. During the 13 months of construction, it will have detrimental effects on the customers visiting Margrange, with heavy plant, HGVs causing mud and dust. It will have a negative effect on anyone trying to navigate the farm lane to Margrange. Customers are as horrified by the proposals as the residents, and some of these are here today. The impact of the 9-foot black solar panels on the natural environment is a distressing thought. There will also be a significant business loss to the tenant farmers, losing 190 acres of BMV land. Gross value. Enviromena claim that the solar farm could financially benefit Doncaster to the tune of 800,000 per annum, but this is just 1/5 of that has been generated currently by local businesses. Only a small loss suffered by local businesses would result in no net gain for Doncaster as a result of the solar farm. This has been ignored by Enviromina and the LPA. MPPF paragraph 88 states that planning decisions should enable sustainable growth and expansion of all types of business in rural areas, enable the retention and development of local services such as local shops, meeting places and open spaces. This weighs strongly against the proposal. Thank you.
Seventh harm, amenity. Local residents feel that Mar has already made a huge contribution and sacrifice to renewable energy with its very local wind farm since 2012, which will be there for at least 40 years. The solar farm would be yet another eyesore for 40 years until at least 2067. The majority of the residents along the A635 will not be able to look at the countryside. All they will see is an industrial landscape with a solar farm to the left and a wind farm to the right. The residents at Margrange Farm, instead of seeing fields, will look over a sea of black with glinting glare. Can you imagine the psychological impact? Enviromina's own noise report is guesswork at best. Enviromina has failed to give the consultants enough information to properly conduct a noise report. The type of inverters is unknown. The locations are unknown. How can you make a 40-year decision on this report? Despite their best efforts to make this sound as good as possible and remain within reasonable parameters, the noise level early mornings and late evenings will still be above background noise levels at 43 decibels. The 3 decibel increase is noticeable to residents of Grange House. Enviromina justifies this by saying residents will probably be inside at them times. Would you like to be trapped in your house due to noise? This is only the best case scenario. As the fans and bearings on the inverters wear, the sound will get even louder. The LPA states wrongly the operational noise levels will be below background levels, and that to protect the amenity of nearby residents, condition 28 will be used to ensure this. How is this possible? Will the inverters be turned off? So now we know that noise levels will be above background noise levels and that this will negatively impact the amenity of nearby residents. This is not good enough for a 40-year permission so close to where people live. Solar farm output. Mar Solar Farm should have a maximum generation capacity of 40 megawatts. Solar farms only use a small fraction of this capacity, about 9.5% in the UK in 2024. So in reality, it's a 3.8 megawatt solar farm. The solar farm does not represent good use of 190 acres of agricultural land. It will contribute about 0.01% of the UK's electric and will only save 0.003 of the UK's carbon dioxide emissions, a drop in the ocean and not a special circumstance. But I'll pass this to Councillor Reid.
When will this solar farm actually work? Based on the evidence available for you today, the honest answer is no one knows, but not for a very long time. Information drawn from the National Energy System Operator shows that any realistic grid capacity in this area is not expected until around 2035 or later. That means this development cannot export electricity, its sole purpose for roughly a decade. That matters because we are being asked to accept all of the harm now in return for benefits that are delayed, uncertain and modest. Crucially, there is no confirmed grid connection route, no confirmed substation and no confirmed delivery programme before members. Yet connecting a scheme of this scale would almost certainly require several miles of underground cabling through or around the town, with significant and prolonged disruption to residents and businesses. None of that has been properly assessed because the grid solution does not exist in a form that can be scrutinised. Members are also told that proof of a commercially and technically viable grid connection exists, but that it cannot be shared due to commercial sensitivity. That is not a sound basis for decision making. Planning decisions must be based on transparent, testable evidence, not assurances that members are asked to take on trust. This proposal causes substantial and immediate harm. Harm to greenbelt openness, harm to a valued open landscape, loss of 190 acres of best and most versatile agricultural land directly conflicting with a council motion, harm to the setting of the conservation village of Mar, loss of amenity for residents and local businesses, especially Margrange Farm, increased crime in the area and the real prospect of major disruption associated with grid works that have not been properly defined or assessed. Against that, the benefit is a relatively small contribution to renewable energy with no certainty of delivery for at least a decade.
1 minute.
Paragraph 153 of the MPPF is clear. Very special circumstances exist only where the benefits clearly outweigh the harm. In this case, they plainly do not. Finally, members should reflect on inconsistency. Significant weight is given to the climate emergency declaration, yet no weight at all is given to the council's motion opposing solar development on BMV land. Both were passed by full council. Members are entitled to ask why one counts and the other does not. For these reasons, very special circumstances have not been demonstrated, and I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, councillors. Just some legal here.
Thank you. Councillor Ransom, apologies. We've been engaged in some correspondence recently. Have you got any interests in relation to the tea rooms that you'd like to disclose, just for purpose of full disclosure? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to disclose to the committee that Philip Hardy is my brother, but I have no financial gain whatsoever in the business.
Thank you. Right. Does any member wish to talk to the councillors? Bob?
Yeah, I think Councillor Ransom answered some of the questions, but I'll just ask again to make sure. Did you say there's 30 plus people employed there at the tea rooms and the farm shop? Yeah.
Local people. Sorry, Chair. Local people and also family members. It's a family business. There are a lot of family members employed there as well. But yes, it's local people, 30.
And the numbers attending customers up to 2,000 a week, you mentioned?
2,000 a week, yes.
And just lastly, how long has the tea rooms and the farm shop been operating as a business? Do you know? Yeah.
25 years.
Right.
25 years, the shop. And I would say the tea rooms not quite as long.
That's great, thank you.
Is that okay? Thank you.
Any more questions, committee? Right then. We've received a request to speak from Mr. Lee Adams from Enviromina. That's the applicant in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press a large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute your microphone when you're finished. I understand you've also got some technical experience and support of this as well, so the committee will have the opportunity to ask some technical questions as well. So if you'd like to commence when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair members. My name is Lee Adams at Enviromina. Just wanted to address a couple of the earlier concerns by the objectors today. Confirm that no option was taken at the quarry. Not sure where this came from. That's a matter of public record. Should land registry need to be checked. And there is no job losses. It's been confirmed by the landlord that the current tenant farmer farms over 3,000 acres and the jobs will continue. So there is no job losses. And as far as the grid connection, I can confirm that we do have a gate to confirmed connection by NISO, and that can be a matter of the public record. We are a UK-based renewable company, but owned by a UK shareholder. We develop, build, own and operate and maintain our schemes across the country, ensuring that we are heavily invested and that we deal with any social and honour any social obligations. We operate many sites across the UK and have been for many years. The 77-hectare site, alongside the busy A1, is around 5% of the size of other solar farms many people be aware of in the area, and has been through an extensive 2-year process working with officers. There are no public rights of way that will be affected by the project, and significant boundary planting is proposed to ensure additional habitat for local wildlife, as well as reducing any landscape and visual impact. Trial trenching surveys has confirmed that there will be no detrimental archaeology impact. We recognise the concerns raised by Councillor Ransom's family tea shop. We personally engaged with Councillor Ransom and her family prior to the development process. I'm pleased to confirm to all members that deliveries are done via the site entrance over half a kilometre away from the tea shop, coming directly from the highways. No weekend deliveries taken place, which has been conditioned by the council. And should members decide to impose further conditions, we are happy to limit deliveries even further to no deliveries on the Thursday or Friday, and noting the farm shop is closed for most of the working week. Renewable energy critical to the operation and growth of the national economy. The UK renewable energy sector has pointed for significant growth, suggesting over 35,000 jobs per annum by 2030, potentially rising to 60,000, creating investment, high demand for electricians, technicians and engineers, alongside a critical need for green skills development to meet net zero goals. A detailed independent economic study is being prepared as part of the application, which illustrates the significant socio-economic benefits of the project, both at national and local level. And the findings of the report have been reviewed and acknowledged by Doncaster Council's independent investment team, Business Doncaster. We are already in dialogue with Business Doncaster and the Chief Executive's Directorate at the Council on how we jointly deliver a programme of additional skilled job and utilise existing supply chains. I've already been approached from a number of local contractors keen to work on the project. In addition to the value brought through job creation to the area, the project netted to contribute over $6.5 million in business rates over the project lifespan. This will be wholly net additional income to the Council, which can retain 100% of the income and help towards the Council's cost base. Enviromina already operates sites across the country where sheep grazing the land takes place, and we aim to do so at this project, enabling dual use and benefit to the environment and the landlord. In addition, and outside of the planning process, we highlight that Enviromina has set up a 200,000 community benefit fund. This is to be managed by an independent grant company, Point North, to which local groups can apply for funds to support community projects and initiatives in the Doncaster area. 200,000 enough to support dozens of community projects, sports clubs, youth services and village halls. Point North is a UK-based charity. Since its founding in 1995, the organisation has distributed more than 71 million in grants, and as a trusted partner, they will ensure that the Mars Solar Farm reaches the areas of greatest need. The scheme is in accordance with the policies of the local plan NPPF. Impacts are limited in scale, temporary and fully reversible. Given the clear compliance with policy and the significant benefits for Doncaster, we respectfully ask that you approve the application. And myself and my Chief Development Officer, Mark Harding, is happy to answer any questions the members may have.
Thank you. If you turn your microphone off. Cheers. Right. As committee members, would you like to ask any question? Steve?
Thank you. That's lovely what you've just said there, because I can read it all on your website, nearly word for word on the MAR one. The jobs bit and tens of millions of pounds to local economy, is that what you referred to as the business rates, is the tax that we pay to local authority?
It's an independent study that was taken out all from local jobs, business rates. So it was an independent assessment that was done on the whole project, local supply chain, and that was an independent report that was done, and it was sent to the council, and the Business Doncaster had no concerns with the methodology, and they approved it.
Just with the business rates one, what currently, I mean, you obviously brought up business rates, what currently is the council getting from the land as it stands as business rates?
I'm not aware of the current number, but with the solar farm on the land, any business rates that are currently applicable will be in addition to the solar farm. So it's not an either, it's not an or, it's an and. And I know business rates comes up, but to be clear, the business rates that is calculated to 170,000 a year, that is not in relation to how the performance of the solar farm, or it's simply that's the amount that we need to pay, and any future business rates will be determined by the council, not Enviromina. Whether the site operates at 100%, cloudy years, etc., the number is set by what is on the land. So it's determined by the council, not the performance of the solar farm.
And I'm assuming that'd be because of the land classification of it, not of it being more industrial than it would be agricultural.
Sorry, I don't understand the question. I mean, business rates has to be paid by all solar farms, and we operate over 100 of these across the country. So we've got extensive experience in paying business rates, and we know what we need to pay.
And sorry, Chair, what is the life expectancy of a panel?
So once the panel are manufactured, they're guaranteed to operate at a minimum of 80% up to year 25 to 30. So we would potentially expect to replace some of the modules depending on the efficiency, but they're guaranteed to do 80% after 25 to 30 years, so the majority of the lifetime. And again, we've got experience and we've been operating a number of these projects across the country. Some have needed replacement of the same size module that was granted during the original application, so there's no difference in the project, like any electrical equipment.
And just finally, sorry, Chair, just finally, is there a potential moving forward, given that this is a project over 40 years?
Yeah.
Would it become national infrastructure and therefore compulsory purchased or used by the government? Could it be taken out of both the landowners and your hands to become, for want of better words, a power station? Because the power station land had to come from somewhere, which would, all of it once upon a time would have been agricultural. And then does that get snapped up into government use?
I'm not aware of any renewable project that's gone through a compulsory purchase procedure. We lease the land from the farmer and the landlord. There is no evidence or projected way. I mean, energy mixes widely. There is solar, wind, renewable, nuclear, gas, coal. I'm not aware of anything that there's no precedent being set to compulsory purchase lands, and I would imagine it would be strongly opposed. But it's not something I'm aware of that's even been discussed or suggested or drafted or minuted or anything like that.
Anyone else? Rob?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to press more on sort of the business side of things. We've heard from Councillor Ransom that the Margrange Farm employs 35 people there, including family members as well. And the planning officer agrees that this application would cause harm to that business.
Yeah.
The upshot of what you said from Environment's point of view on the local economy and benefits for the council is that you're engaging with the council and Business Doncaster to engage with local firms, and local firms have contacted you.
Yeah.
However, there's no obligation, I don't believe, to employ local Doncaster businesses. There's Informative 8, which says that you're encouraged to do so, but you're not mandated to do so. It is likely that from this development, Margrange Farm shop will close and those 35 people won't be employed there anymore. And on the business rate side of things, there'll be a number of parcels of land with warehouses, etc., that will be generating business rates for the council going forward. The council not exactly going to say, oh yeah, we're not going to enjoy having this business rates coming in. So does Environment understand the destabilising impact this could have to the local economy in Mar itself?
Yeah, like I said in my speech, we recognise and we engaged with the Margrange farm shop, tea shop early on. We've delivered a number of these schemes very close to farm shops across the country of this nature, and not one farm shop, tea shop, or any local amenity has ever closed. Like I said earlier, in terms of the officer has mentioned moderated negative weight to as per the committee report. And as we've said further, the farm shop is open 3 days of the week, and we've recognised that 2 of those days there will be no deliveries. And then to add further support to the scheme, if members decided to impose no deliveries during the operational hours, then we would happily support that. Also recognising that the entrance for the construction is way over 1 kilometre, through the adopted highway, which is highways lands on the corner. So we're happy to work with members if they wanted to impose further conditions, but we've got no experience of local businesses closing as part of this.
Thank you, Chair. And just for Susie, if you could note that consideration. Thank you.
Anyone else? Chris?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking at paragraph 513, health, and I'm surprised but pleased that electromagnetic field density is measured. Well, it's not measured. You've put not proven if it's detrimental to health, as it's a relatively new industry. Now, what are you telling me is relatively new? The knowledge of electromagnetic fields or solar farms? I don't understand it. What's new?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I would.
Well, that's obvious from here.
I would comment the solar farms have been operational for 20 plus years in the UK and worldwide, and I'm not aware of any concerns. The solar modules that we will be installing, that we have installed, is exactly the same that is on your rooftops. The particular kit is not, it's not an industrial solar panel, it's the same one that's on solar modules. The inverters are the same ones that Doncaster Council has got on existing buildings and is in the homes. And there's no, I'm not aware of any independent or any scientific report to say, and like I say, we've been operating solar farms for many years and we've got engineers who visit the site, and I'm not aware of any concerns.
You do not surprise me, sir. EMF measurement, there are standards from the World Health Organization. They've been incorporated into British law. EMC, slightly different, electromagnetic radiation, radio waves, are well-known phenomena from optimizers and inverters, from solar farms, from rooftop installations. It's something I've mentioned many times before. The top and bottom is you do not measure it. You're not required to, and you don't. It may come as some surprise that electromagnetic compatibility, your installation would be classified as mobile. I don't see any wheels on the plans. But as it's not a permanent installation, by British law, which was incorporated from EU law with the withdrawal agreement, we swerve that law by saying it is a temporary site, therefore does not comply. It should do, but this is the green agenda all over again.
Have you got a question there, Chris?
No end of different regulations and laws. You don't measure it, you don't want to measure it, so it doesn't exist.
I'm not sure how to respond and whether there's a question there, but all of the kit we install will comply and does comply, has complied with, and the projects we're installing today complies with British law. And I'm sure there'd be a lot of people who would correct if we didn't install it with British law.
Show me the measurements.
I'm not sure there was a question there.
You say you comply with British law. Show me your results.
I'm more than happy to, I mean, we've already shared as part of the planning application the kit that we propose to install. The case officer has got the inverters and all of the spec sheets data, along with the modules, and all of the kit we are seeking for has got, comes with is installed in accordance with British law, is all I can answer to the question, Chair.
The planning department the planning department don't understand it. I've been down that road before.
Councillor Kidger.
I'm not sure. I'm not yet to comment on the qualifications and merits of Doncaster Council's planning department.
Just to be clear, Councillor Kidger, matters of British standards or in terms of law, but we need to focus on planning considerations. Okay, thank you.
It's Craig next. But imagine you're next and it's Rob.
Hiya. Just when the solar farm's all built out, how many people will be employed by or working there permanently? or is it does it run itself kind of thing?
Very nature of solar farms, they are no permanent jobs on site. But a project of this nature, we've estimated to be a couple of equivalent full-time roles maintaining the project, but they'll also be maintaining other projects in the area. But the very nature of the project is not manned.
Majid.
Thank you, Chair. Can I draw your attention to point 4.19 on the report? I don't know if you have a chance to read through there. It's in relation to the figures provided for yield from farming and arable farming. Are you in agreement with the figures which are stated in the report?
4.19.
Please.
I'm in agreement that my technical team has as planning experts and verified by your planning team has taken those as accurate as referenced, I would imagine.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Rob.
Sorry, Chair, I got interested in Councillor Carr's question. I've momentarily forgot what mine was. Councillor Reid mentioned that the solar panels wouldn't be operational until 2035. Can you confirm if that's correct?
No, it's incorrect. So as part of the recent NISO application, the NISO reform process, that was separated between Gate 1 and Gate 2, i.e. coming online now or post 35. And I can confirm that we've got a Gate 2 off us, and we've got a relevant connection point into Doncaster. I can confer to my team, but it goes into Doncaster substation, confirmed, secured 2-3 years ago, deposits paid, engineering studies taking place, and Northern Power Group will be awaiting our next stages once we confirm, should the application be approved for the engineering works to get us on the grid. But it exists.
So when will it be operational? When will the power be generated from there and go into homes?
So the standard process is should the application be consented, we will then speak to Northern Power. They will allocate us a slot on the grid, and then we build back. They typically allocate a project within a few years, and the nature of this project would take 30 weeks construction. You add in some discharge conditions and some legal works, so it's very, very standard. But we do sit before you today with a Gate 2 offer.
I'm not being flippant. I've not had an answer there. If I push you to, will it be before 2035?
Yes.
Okay. So there'll be a number of years of disruption for the residents in the building and construction, and there won't be any merit from that work for a number of years.
No, because we would work back from the confirmed connection date from Northern Power Grid. So just how we build out these projects. We wouldn't build it now if the connection was towards 22, 23, 32, 33. The project takes maybe 2 years in the pre-planning with the Northern Power Grid, and is very standard, you work back from that process. So we've started construction projects now that we're connecting in 26, 27, 28. So it would be very silly and financially crazy for us to put 35 to 40 million pounds worth of kit in the ground and then not have an expert. So the very nature is we build these as when they are ready to connect.
Okay, so I'm going to play back to you what I didn't hear. So
okay, sorry, I'm trying to be as clear as possible.
clear as mud, I'm afraid. I didn't hear a confirmed year for when there will be power generated from those solar panels going into homes. I didn't hear a clear date as to when the setup will stop, and I didn't hear a clear date as to sort of when residents will stop seeing disruption. That's what I've heard back. If you want to clarify any
I'm happy to clarify. Yeah. So taking one of your points, in terms of the disruption, it is 35 weeks construction. That is conditioned and is not the year or so that was mentioned by the objectors. It's 35 weeks, which, again, we've been building these things for 20 years. So hopefully that makes it quite clear on that point. In terms of the specific date that you start working back from, so at the moment, all projects across the UK, you either get Gate 1, which is post-35, or Gate 2, which is pre-2035. This project has a Gate 2. The exact slot you've got on the grid is further determined when you have further technical engagement with Northern Power. That is the same whether you're building a data centre, wind farm, solar farm. So if the project was to be passed today, we would then have detailed discussions with Northern Power. They'd look at the existing arrangement and go, Environment, you can connect in, say, 2030. We would then work out with our engineering team, procurement. It might take 2 years, not physical works, just to be clear, if it's on site for 6 months. But there is a lot of pre-work and might take 6 months to discharge conditions. So we start procuring that, working back from the energisation date within a 3 to 6 month period to allow for any delays. And this is, we evidenced by, we switched on the project in Essex in July. And the network was ready about 3 or 4 weeks before we were ready for first export. So hopefully that the date is not set in stone as in 1st of July X, because that's not how these projects work. I'm not being elusive. That's whether you're, again, the same if you're building if you build in a data center today, whether it's generation or demand, if you build in a data center, the Northern Power would say, great, now you've got your application, now you've got it confirmed, we'll tell you when you can, and then you work back from that. It's exactly the same process.
Thank you. One last one from me, it doesn't require a response. It will likely be disconcerting for residents to hear there's no sort of confirmed year as to when it's going to go ahead. And if the application does go forward, I would expect significant contact from the developer to the resident as to when it's all going to happen. I keep referring back to our existing projects and schemes and experience. We have tried and we will continue to engage with the joint rural parish and any local parishioners and councillors. And I'm happy to, we would need to discharge conditions. So there is certainly not yesterday, spade tomorrow. I'm more than happy for additional conditions to be put in place if the members see fit that we needed to give the residents 3 to 6 months notice before first works. I'm relatively comfortable in that process because there is things that need to be done and we can build into that programme, not a problem. Susie, just to note that point.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Jan?
Thank you, Chair. Could you possibly expand on the dual use aspect of the project in the sense that we now know there will be above ground cabling and ultimately the project will be unmanned, as you've stated. So what's going to happen to the sheep?
We've got sheep on a lot of our sites. We never say that we guarantee sheep, but all the project is what we class as sheep ready in the industry. So the whole project is ready for sheep to graze, and I could take members to a number of our sites tomorrow to say that sheep graze, and the farmers have access to the site. There is nothing. Members could walk around our site. There is nothing there that, if you was to touch the system, it doesn't. There's nothing live or exposed, and the project is sheep ready, as evidenced by our existing sites.
Steve?
Thank you. It's just a quick one. Where would
Just 1 minute, Steve. Can you turn your mic off?
Apologies.
Where would it connect into the grid?
The connection was confirmed by Northern Power to go into across the A1 towards Doncaster Central, all through highways.
Whereabouts in Doncaster Central, roughly?
Can I refer to my expert, Mark Harding, on the location?
Just kill your mic off.
Yeah, it's into Doncaster Central Substation, I don't have the location on the map here, but it's into the edge of the city centre.
Right, I'm trying to place in my head where that might be, but, pardon? Greyfriars, right, so you're coming in, and as you've just said, it will be on the highway, so I'm assuming that highway would have to be dug up, and then the cabling and connecting put in the, so that will be quite a lot of roadworks then, won't it?
Yeah, correct. All cabling will be underground. I think it's obviously a matter for kind of permitted development by the DNO. So that'll all be done again once we, again, subject to planning being consented. That will be a matter, obviously, then we'll deal with regards to relevant permits that our independent connections provider and the DNO require to carry out those works separate to the planning application.
Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can you just help me out? Don't the guidelines, the accepted guidelines, suggest that high-grade agricultural land should not be used for these kind of developments, but what we might call grey belt should be used?
In planning policy, it's widely known that the grading of the land, I believe, is a consideration. We commissioned an independent study and carried out the surveys in accordance with the methodology, which has been confirmed, and there is no what's classed as BMV, best and most versatile soils on this land. That, again, just to be clear, that doesn't mean that nothing can be grown. It's not to give a picture of desolate land, but is a clear indication, which has been evidenced by the tenant and the landlord, that yields are historically low and can be sporadic.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to come into, because a subsequent test of this soil said that it was much better than your expert said, and evidence proves that this land is yielding higher amounts of crops than would be suggested by the other sort of grade land that they're talking about. So it's much better than the land that you're saying.
Yeah, sorry, let me just jump in on this point. So I think there's obviously a few matters that you've raised there. One is, and Lee referenced the BMV reporting. So obviously we prepared, the independent company prepared a BMV study on the land at the start of the development works for us, which was very much in line with the MAF industry guidance for carrying out BMV surveys across land. That survey covered the whole of the land at the necessary interval points that the MAF guidance actually relates to. I think subsequent to that, fully aware that there's been two more studies carried out on the land. One obviously by the objectors, obviously came onto the land to do some studies and tested a couple of areas on the site. Subsequent to that, obviously, as Susie briefed members on earlier, there was a further study on the land, which, again, I'll be honest, came up with a different result. So I think there's 3 different surveys done in 3 different ways on the land. All of them produced different results in terms of what the grading of land was. I certainly agree, and I think Susie would conclude that none of them were in line with the historic grade 2 maps, which I know has been quoted by a few of the objectors. So a whole different kind of range of results that have come from those tests. I think just to then step back in terms of requirements for development on BMV land, just bringing it back to that point of saying, actually, let's assume it was BMV land, or let's assume it's not, whatever way it goes. I think there is no ruling to suggest that solar farms should not go on BMV land, and there are a number of solar farms in the UK permitted that are on BMV land, grade 2, grade 3A land.
Thanks for that. can I also ask, how much degradation of the land would you expect in the 40 years that these solar panels will be on it?
How much, sorry, degradation of the land?
Degradation from being prime farmland, how much degradation to that property would happen in 40 years of solar panels being on it?
Well, I think, so we have a strict set of conditions with the planning application, the proposed conditions, which has been presented by the planning officers. And I think as part of that, the land at the end of the life needs to be returned in a similar condition to as it is today. I think just by its very nature, over the course of the life of the project, clearly there'll be no intensive farming practices carried out on the land. I think look, for us to sit there and say that it's going to improve would be, it would be a step too far. But actually, there should be no further degradation of the land by the fact there's no intensive farming activities planned on that land for 40 years.
And then I'll just add that point is conditioned by, should this be consented, it would be conditioned by Doncaster Council, and those suite of conditions have already been approved.
Thank you. And finally, while we're talking about the environment, what happens to these solar panels at the end of 40 years?
We can confirm that they over 99.9% can be recycled. They are steel and glass, and there is already policies in place on our existing sites that everything should happen to the project in Enviromina, that insurance policies kick in and the glass and the metal is recycled.
Thank you, Chair.
Majid.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back on the questions that you asked earlier, and my question earlier on to the applicant in relation to 4.19 of the report. I'm sure the applicant said that he or his technical experts had read the reports and there would be an agreement. And I reference the study, well, the source from DEFRA 2023, where it shows that we've got an increase of yield in relation to the national average of 32% for barley and 41% above the national average when it comes to rapeseed oil. So are we now saying that you don't agree with the reports? When earlier on you did say that you did agree with the reports. I'm just a bit confused, Chair. Can I get some clarification on that?
Sorry, I think, let me just pick that up. I think there was a bit of confusion between us in terms of the question earlier on. So I believe this has come from one of the objectors' reports collected from data nearby. I'll be honest, we haven't verified that information. There's no requirement on us to verify information unless we are required to by the planning officer. I think, as I can say, all we have done obviously is engaged in terms of the BMV studies on the land, which is what we talked about earlier on.
Chair, can I? So, just so we're clear on this, are we saying the information contained in the report is incorrect? Is that what you're saying?
I couldn't verify that information. I'm not saying it's incorrect or correct.
Okay, so in the same vein, the information that you've provided in the report, you can't confirm if it's correct or incorrect either. Is that what we're saying? Are we now saying that officers at Doncaster Council are including information in reports which you will sit there and say you can't confirm either way? There's information here, so if you won't mind turning your microphone off as well in between questions and answers, it helps with clarity of the voice on the recordings as well. Chair, sorry, can I continue? Is that okay? Yeah, so going back to the original question, it was in relation to the source is DEFRA. So are we in agreement that DEFRA, when they provide facts and figures, are correct? I'd say most people would say yes, we are. And there's information contained in the report that we're using to assess the application today. And I'd say that you guys as a team and your organisation have took that on board. And we are, as members, and our planning officers would have given that information to us to be used. And going back to the figures, the yield for barley is 32% above the national average. So regardless of land classification, to the layman, that would show that it's good quality land providing that yield. And when it comes to, it was rapeseed oil, 42% above the national average. Again, the source is DEFRA. So to the layman, regardless of land classification, whether it's 1, 2, 3 or 4 classification, as a layman and somebody from a farming background myself, I would say that's a fantastic yield and it's prime agricultural land. Sorry, Chair, there wasn't a question there. I've just gone on for a bit.
Sorry, no, I wasn't named earlier, but I'm Amy Heinsohn, Planning Associate, Stantec. I've been working alongside Enviromina with this planning application for the last 2 years. The paragraph which has been cited there was provided as part of a summary of public consultation responses. I believe, sorry, I'm just looking across at the report there. It was provided by Cynthia Ransom, but I'm sorry if that is incorrect. We have not been directly provided that information. That was just part of a public discussion that has gone in with the application. The information which is cited there by DEFRA isn't for this site. It is a general assessment. As it's been paraphrased here, I am not sure exactly what geographical area it covers, but this site is not directly related to those figures from what I can read from that point. So we were not lying, we were not trying to disguise or say that Doncaster Council's planning officers provide incorrect information or not. This is not information provided by Doncaster Council officers. I believe it has been provided by public.
Yeah, just to confirm, DEFRA have not done an independent survey of the site.
Can I just be clear on this? The councillor did ask a very specific question and he guided you to the actual paragraph involved. So if you knew that when he asked you the first time round, possibly you should have pointed this out the first time round. Because as a result, there's lots of council over there biting at a bit wanting to get into this question. Yeah, so it's really important that when you get asked a question that you understand it. And if you don't, say, I don't understand. Carry on, Jude.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, going back to, sorry, I've missed your name, sorry.
For the record, Amy Heinsohn from Stantec.
Amy, yeah, thank you. So going back to 4.19, at no point did I say that DEFRA have provided the information in relation to the land that's in question here, but the figure that DEFRA have given us is the national average. So that baseline is provided by DEFRA, and we can all be in agreement that figure which would have been provided by DEFRA is accurate. And similarly, the information which is in the report, which is the figure which is 32.5% and 41.9% above that national average, which is collated by DEFRA, I take that on face value because it's in the report and it's here. If the information would have been ambiguous or incorrect or false or sourced in a way that we wouldn't take on board, I'm sure it wouldn't be in the report. So I think you're trying to muddy the waters by saying it's not come from DEFRA. At no point did I say it did come from DEFRA. What I've said is the baseline, the average, is a DEFRA figure. The field produces 32.5%. This is in 2023, so it's one specific year above that figure. And with the other crop, it's 41.9, again, in 2023, above the DEFRA baseline figure. Are you in agreement that those figures in the report are correct? That's what my question was originally. And your colleague sat in the middle said, yes, his technical experts had read that and they were in agreement. So you're not in agreement with the figures, so we've got incorrect figures in the report. Can you just clarify for me?
Yeah,
Thank you, Chair.
Apologies. At the time, I misunderstood the question and I'd taken the note from the Chair. Just wanted to be clear. I can't verify that this. I mean, this is a list of facts provided by the objector, and taken. If it's a DEFRA reference, then if I'm allowed, I'm minded to agree that the objector hasn't lied. So I'm happy to note that. But also, I would just add that if taken these figures as correct as national statistics, I would just like to add that that is not in relation to the site. Am I okay to? Is that...
Sorry, I'm going to really break this down. So maybe I'm being really silly with my questions, Chair. I often am, but maybe on this instance I'm being really silly. DEFRA have given us a figure. Let's call it 1. let's talk about rain for a minute. So we're going to get 1 mil of rain tonight. That's a national average that we're going to receive. In Doncaster, we get 4 mil of rain, which is how much more than the national average? 3 mil more than the national average. The figures are there. The figures don't lie. It's very straightforward. DEFRA have given us a national average that this type of land produces X amount, and the yield on this land is 32.5% above that. And in relation to rapeseed oil, it's 41.9. Chair, if you want to adjourn and read this out to me and I'm reading it wrong, I'm more than happy for you to do so, because maybe my reading skills aren't to the standard that need to be on planning committee. Am I missing something here, Chair?
I think it's important that this report's 121 pages long, and these guys, all of us, have sat and read it thoroughly. We've had it for a week. It's been on a public domain and everybody's able to read it for a week. So to now start talking about information when you're being asked specifically if the statistics are right, it's really important, because these guys are going to make a decision that change. Everybody behind you there are wanting a decision today, and it's got to be a right decision. And to give you a fighting chance, and also to give everybody behind you their right, we need to make sure that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. So again, when the information's conveyed, please be thorough, read it properly, agree or disagree it. But don't say you agree with it and then argue to us later, because it don't work. I think planning's going to just have a little bit of chat on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to make absolutely clear the position in this respect. So the detail that's included in the report at paragraph 4.19 at page 23 of your papers is information that was included by Councillor Ransom in making her objections to the application. What we did as part of our assessment on the application is take the information that was provided by the representations we received, which gave certain assertions around independent work that they'd had commissioned around best and most versatile land. We looked at the applicant's details in terms of what they provided in terms of best and most versatile land, and they didn't add up. They were giving us different conclusions as to the percentage of BMV across the site. So what we did was commission our own independent advice on the matter to establish what the facts were. So what I would do in that respect is direct you to page 59 of your papers. So we talk there at paragraph 7.44 about the landscape assessment. That's our independent assessment that we had commissioned to enable us to advise you as to the position. And then if you carry that forward to paragraph 7.64 and the conclusions around BMV, and that's at page 63, we state, whilst the applicant continues to assert there are no BMV soils present on the site, and you heard the applicant mention that a little earlier, overall it appears likely, based on our landscape report that we had commissioned, that there will be a medium-term loss of potentially as much as 37 or more hectares of BMV land during the lifetime of the development. There's a lot of information there, as Chair says, but hopefully that makes clear that the statements that are made at 4.19 are third-party representations providing their take on the situation, and that's based on advice that they were getting. But what we sought to do in this circumstance was have that all independently verified, and that's the contents of the report that you have before you. So hopefully that clarifies things.
Thank you, Emma. Any more questions? Majid?
Yeah, Chair, I just want to say thank you, Emma, but I'll go back to my original question to the applicant way before at the beginning was, is he in agreement with the figures in 4.19? Are they accurate? That's what my original question was.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say you didn't help yourself. Anybody else got any more questions? Rob?
I was waiting very patiently. It's fair to say the Design and Conservation Officer don't very much like this application. I'd direct you to point 4.74 on page 33. It starts off, I still believe that further public benefits could be provided by the scheme than just providing energy from solar panels, so that is more holistic. There's an example quoted midway through that paragraph. There also seems to be the opportunity to provide a link to the current dead end of public footpath that leads to Raven Hills. Does the applicant have any influence over nearby land to enable this to occur? On that specific point, would you be able to provide an answer?
Sure. Yeah, it was a discussion we went through at the time, and there is no ability with regards to neighbouring owned land by the owner of the land to enable any connection of any footpaths. It's actively something we look to do on other sites where there's footpaths that transverse the site. But with this one, obviously, the footpath is outside. The only footpath bridleway is outside of the land owned by the landowner. So there's no opportunity, unfortunately.
And further to that point, then, are there any further?
Turn your mic off, please.
Are there any further design and conservation benefits that Enviromina could provide above and beyond what's already mentioned? The member of the public, the parish council already mentioned that the British Horse Racing Association had concerns regarding the bridle paths.
Just in terms of additional benefits, I think that whilst it's not been something which we've actively discussed, things we have done in the past on sites with nearby heritage assets, we've put some information boards that we've added to part of the development where possible. Now, obviously, that links in nicely. Usually, if there's footpaths that run through the site, we have some information boards regarding potential heritage assets. Obviously, here there's no footpaths, but it would be something which, again, we could look to include on the outskirts of the site in terms of any information boards. But it is a little bit limited by the land holding. So there are, I don't believe, other than that opportunity, I don't believe there's any more things that we can add to be fair.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Can I just ask a question? Well, a couple of questions. The transformers, are they going to have oil in them? And if so, is there any risk that could contaminate the land if there's any leakages from the transformer systems?
There is a small amount of number of oil transformers on the site, and they are regularly maintained, and there is spill kits, and if there was any leakage, it wouldn't go onto the site, and that would be, again, conditioned that they need to be installed in adherence with that.
And then your substations, before they go into grid, what sort of fauna and flora are you putting around them?
I mean, the substations, I need to refer back to the case officer in terms of the designs, but there is no, the site is screened with additional screening, but there's nothing directly outside the substations that has been requested by any of the landscape officers.
I just noticed the 4.3 metres high, these buildings. We know that there's going to be solar panels 2.6 metres high, so I'm guessing it's going to blind that out, whatever you decide to plant around it. But are we going to have literally containers on show where they've not actually been planted to hide that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it would be worthwhile if Susie May would put the landscape strategy back on, but we've worked with regards to impacts on landscape. We've obviously looked to integrate screening around the perimeter of the site, significant screening to the north of the site, which again is obviously where the substation is. So there's already screening proposed in areas near to the substation and to kind of screen views from Mar Village and Conservation Area.
I have got the slide I can show if we can supersede the speakers' videos. So yeah, this is the proposed screening at the near where the transformer stations are, which if you can just make them out of those two rectangles near the entrance on that western parcel there.
I'm looking at them there and it looks like there's no screening around them and you could actually still see them from road. I don't know if I'm incorrect on that.
So it's helpful to bear in mind that this primarily shows the proposed screening. There is also currently hedgerow along Margrange Lane. And so when you're travelling along Barnsley Road, and Bargrange Lane, there wouldn't be much visibility.
And then one more question. In the report, it talks about glare fault at the property next to Margrange Farm, and it says it's going to be subject to glare for a short-term negative impact on the amenity. What's short-term?
I would have to divert to the, I'll be honest, I'd have to go to the landscape strategy in a bit more detail in terms of that, but the glare impacts have been assessed, obviously based upon varying years. Obviously the proposed planting on the development, again, could be more substantial in that area if necessary, but our proposed plans have been through the relevant studies for glint and glare, and that's been found to be acceptable.
So if I can just ask a question, how long are they going to be subject to glint and glare?
I would need to, I'll be honest, I would need to confirm that, but that would likely be until the planting is grown up. In terms of years itself, it would likely be established within a 2 to 3 year period. That obviously planting would take a little while to grow up, but we could obviously look to put some more mature planting in that area to reduce that time down compared to other areas of the site.
Thank you. No more. Oh, sorry, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. On that last point, Appendix 12, page 129, the summary of the look advice to the Council. Just above the table section there, the very last couple of sentences. Look previously requested that the applicant explore the appropriateness of 3 metre high hedgerows across the site with reference to local precedent and character. It is not considered that this point has been considered in detail as part of the amended scheme. Are you able to provide comments on the height of hedgerows and planting?
Sorry, can you just point me in the point of the reference again?
Of course, yeah, page 129 of this pack, just above the table section, the last 2 sentences. All right.
Yeah, sorry, got it now. Thank you. The page numbers are missing off the report. So I think in terms of the hedgerows planned, obviously, what is usual with a solar farm development is the proposed exact heights of the hedgerows are subject to the detailed landscaping strategy, which will be part of the conditions discharge. Traditionally, with solar farm developments, hedgerows are anywhere from 2 to 5 metres in height, usually somewhere around 2 to 3 in terms of hedgerows. Obviously, then there's more substantial tree planting, which gives you additional growth and additional screening. All of that more detailed landscaping strategy management plan comes through as part of the conditions discharge.
Any more questions? Thank you. Do the officers wish to clarify any matters of fact prior to members going to debate?
Chair, yes, a few. If I can pick up on a few, and then I'm sure Susie will have some more technical points just to pick up on, and bear with us because obviously there was a lot there to take in. So just working backwards in order of things as they arose. We've covered off the point in terms of landscape strategy, but just to note that condition 13 is recommended at page 104 of your papers, and that will contain the detail of the soft landscaping scheme should members grant planning permission for this today. I've covered the point off around best and most versatile land, so I won't do that again. We've covered the point around other legislation and British standards that Councillor Kidger mentioned earlier on in the questioning. So I would just reiterate the point that Michael mentioned around that. We're not required through planning decisions to replicate any other legislation or standards, so not a material consideration for a basis for your decision today. In terms of benefits that was discussed when the applicant was speaking, there was talk around business rates, community funds. What you'll see is no mention of the business rates in our committee report because that's not a material consideration for you, and the community fund we've made clear has no weight in our exercise in terms of benefits because we can't secure that through planning obligations. So just to make sure that you're aware of that when you're going into debate. There was a question raised around noise, and just to clarify in terms of that our environmental health colleagues have obviously gone into the detail and assessed the noise assessment and are happy with the conclusions drawn there and haven't raised any objections on noise grounds. Bear with me, there was a comment made around Mar having already had its fair share of renewable energy projects. So just to make clear that there's nothing enshrined in local or national policy that sets a limit in this way. So it's not a case that a community's had a renewable energy project and then therefore doesn't need to take any more. It's each case on its own merits in line with national and local policy. There was a question around site security. And the question around the use of deer fencing to secure the site rather than more substantial measures that were recommended by the police. That's always going to be a balancing exercise in terms of the visual impacts that would arise from more substantial means of enclosure and other measures to prevent crime or to ensure the site's secure. We do have a representative from the Designing Out Crime team with us, so if you have any particular questions about that in any more detail, then please do ask them as we go through the debate. There was a question also around planning officers having overridden conservation officers in terms of the harms to the heritage assets versus the benefits. What we do is take the advice that's given by conservation area officers and then do the balancing exercise in terms of what the national policy tells us, and that's why we've come to the conclusions we have in the report in that respect. And lastly, there was question very early on in the speakers around the impacts of this having been assessed cumulatively with other developments in the locality, and just to make sure that you understand that the assessments that have been undertaken have been done so with committed developments in mind. So that's allocated sites and sites with planning permission. Anything prospective that hasn't come through in either of those routes as yet, they wouldn't have been assessed. But in the event that planning permission would be granted for this, then any prospective case applications that came forward after would then have to be assessed in terms of the cumulative impacts, taking this into account. So hopefully that's clear. Susie.
Thank you. Yes, just a couple of other points to pick up. So in terms of the discussion about noise and the lack of detail about the inverters and the transformers, condition 21 requires further details of those. So although there's not currently details of the inverters, and that's to do with the technology evolving and it's not necessarily been chosen yet, we will get details of those inverters, so we'll be able to check that it does align with the conclusions of the noise report in that respect. Just the discussion about the hedgerow height in Appendix 12 recently. So just to clarify that the requested reduction to that hedgerow height along the public right-of-way has actually been enacted. So in the site layout plan, there's now a note saying that the hedgerow adjacent to the public right-of-way and next to the new meadow that's being created will be maintained to between 1 and 2 metres in height. So that's covered both on the site plan, and then, as has also been pointed out, we will be securing landscaping specifications and more details as part of a condition. There was also some discussion about the proposed works to install the grid connection cabling, and just to reaffirm that those works aren't being considered as part of the current planning application. Those would be applied for under permitted development rights by the district network operator, and so they're not a matter that we can take into consideration today. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, we will now go into a debate. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the planning officers questions? Bob.
Yeah, I'd just like to go back to the fencing issue, because I know it's not what the police recommended. As a matter of fact, you put it's just as acceptable. So I'd just like to hear.
Yes, this planning application, obviously the consultation response was from my predecessor, and on such applications, as a bare minimum, we go for a security rating 5. Sorry, yes, apologies. C5, which is a delay. So effectively, deer fencing, there's quite a lot of negatives towards deer fencing. You know, it's a limited deterrent. Whilst effective, obviously, against deer, anybody wanting to gain access, it's quite easily accessible. So the security rated fencing that my colleague recommended is for it's a deter and delay tactic. So, for example, with normal means of trying to gain access to a security rated fence 3, yeah, it will be the normal tools. It could be a grinder. It could be anything like that. So, for these types of fencing, it's a 5-minute delay, which gives obviously the chance for the alarm company or whatever security measures the applicant is going to put in for us to start travelling to that location. I hope that makes sense, because they are quite confusing, some of the ratings.
Can I just say, so that I'm just going back on the amount of police time this must take up, the solar farm theft, because obviously it's usually organised gangs that, you know, do the solar farm theft, so this could possibly take up a lot of extra police resources.
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely. If the security measures in place are not adequate, then that will occur.
So I'm surprised you didn't object to the fence. But anyway, so just say this will also have a big impact on local farms, properties and businesses then, because obviously insurance, premiums, etc. will go up, and the psychological impact. So, yeah, that was interesting. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you. Just clarification really over, and I think it was mentioned before that different things have been taken out of different documents, which they are. But within the local plan, Mar, I'm assuming this comes under Mar's boundary, is defined as a village and is within the green belt thing. There is going to be harm, as has been noted throughout all this. Why on earth has this been considered in the first place? I'm just completely confused. Because if we take I know that the MPPF is overriding things, but we still have an ability to make a decision for ourselves. And why are we taking the MPPF as, just for clarity, as the superseding document that's going to tell us what we should do and give more weight than our own local plan that we've done ourselves?
So, I mean, the MPPF requires a balanced assessment to be made. We are required to give very significant weight to the benefits that I've mentioned. And in terms of the harm to, I think particularly the conservation area, which is what you mean in terms of the harm to the village, because the level of harm is assessed to be less than substantial, and at that point you need to start doing that balancing exercise. In this case, my view is that the benefits do outweigh that harm, and that's my professional opinion, which has led to the recommendation before you. It's ultimately up to members to decide whether or not you agree with that. But my advice is that's the way the balance falls.
In my opinion, I don't, and that is because if you've lived there and you drive there and you see this open countryside and and then all of a sudden you've got these bunding, you've got these edges going up, you've got all of this infrastructure going around, never mind the farm in the middle, that when they look round, all they're going to see is solar panels. That's not right. It shouldn't be like that. That's my opinion anyway. So, I mean, I'm against this. Thank you.
Anyone else? I mean, one thing that I'd like to add is we made a point of saying that assistance towards the council's declared climate change and biodiversity emergency. It stated vision and objectives of the local plan. It gives it significant positive weight, but we have also had 2 full council meetings where significant positive weight's been put behind solar panels being put on the roofs of buildings rather than greenbelt. And that's just my observation. They've been, and I think they've been pretty much unanimous as well. I think a few things that I'm seeing from this this application is greenbelt, conservation area, and jobs. So they're the things that I'm thinking about while making my decision. But Bob, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm similar. I just can't get away from the visual intrusion. These hedgerows will take years to develop. Also, the impact I believe it'll have on the local businesses, jobs, which also ties in with the obvious huge amount of residents that visit the farm shop and tea rooms, which I believe will significantly reduce, and also just now the major security concerns as well.
Would you like to say something?
Thank you, Chair. It might be helpful for members as they're starting to put these thoughts together to look at the balancing exercise we've done in the concluding section of the report. So that starts at page 97. You'll see what weightings we've given to certain matters
Emma,
there.
what paragraph number, please?
Paragraph numbers from 7.224 onwards. That's at page 97 if you have the page number on your papers. You'll see the weightings that we've given to each of those impacts. And so I think it would be a worthwhile exercise for members to have the discussion about those weightings, the impacts that are arising. Because these are matters of judgment, as Susie says, it's her professional judgment that the very clear direction of national policy is to grant planning permission for these developments. But there is a judgment to be made, so I would direct members to the paragraphs following on from 7224 in terms of them conducting that exercise. Thank you.
Chris?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think when we're considering this, the one thing that isn't in this document is the fact that at the last full council meeting, a bipartisan motion was passed objecting to planning planning applications like this for large-scale solar farms on greenbelt land. That motion was passed unanimously by every member of every party, and I think that needs to be given heavy consideration.
I'd like to, from my point of view, I totally agree with you, and I can see equal arguments for why we should or shouldn't accept this. But at the same time, there's lots of reasons why we can agree with what we voted for on that one. So, yeah, I agree with you on that. Rob?
Thanks, Chair. Off the back of what Emma said, having looked at the balancing exercise, I'd like to draw sort of a couple of comparisons out. Point 7.225 lists the negative weightings. In there is included the harm to greenbelt land, which is a substantial negative weight. I'd then compare that to the council's, on the next page, 7.227, the second bullet point on there, and that's regarding the council's declared climate change and biodiversity emergency. I would, this is speculation, we'll call it, but I would expect that that emergency that was stated there wouldn't be in favour of building on greenbelt land. So I would, on the balancing judgment there, I'd say the greenbelt harm outweighs the council's declaration previous years. I would also point out the comparison I made earlier regarding destabilising local economy in Mar versus the equivalent local economic benefits that could arise in the first few years after the development begins, and say that, look, we're Doncaster councillors, we're representing wards across Doncaster on Doncaster Planning Committee. The harms that exist from this application are significantly negative against parts of our borough, and for that reason I won't be supporting this application.
Emma, did you want to ask something?
I just wanted to come back very quickly, Chair, on the point about the council motion, and I completely understand and accept the point being made by members here. What I would just add is my understanding is that motion also referenced the need to comply with local and national policy, which is what we're doing now through the course of the debate. So I just wanted to make that point clear in terms of the relevance to the motion for the planning decision before us now. But absolutely what Councillor Dennis is doing in terms of that rebalancing is the right thing to be doing. So thank you.
Anybody else? I'm sorry, applicants, this is for committee now, so you don't have an opportunity. I'm sorry about that. Anybody else want to add to this before we make a decision? Sorry, it's not. That time's gone now. I'm sorry about that. You've had people down here who have objected. You've had applicants who were for it. We're now in discussion. If anybody else wants to add to it before we make our decision, are we all done? Any officers want to add to it?
Just to recap on what I've heard members say in terms of harms versus the benefits in terms of that planning balance exercise, Chair. So I've heard harms to the openness of the Greenbelt, harms to the conservation area of Mar Village. I've not heard any mention of the listed buildings specifically, so if we wanted to have that discussion, we've got the conservation officer in the room here today. I've heard the visual impact arising from the scale and nature of the development and impacts on the amenities of the local community with specific reference to the farm shop and Grange House. So if there are any others, then it would be useful to hear those.
Anybody got anything to add to that, what Emma's just said? Just bear with me, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm just looking for a report again, trying to identify. There's plenty of objections. Joint rural parishes, British Horse Society is one of them, which I think were mentioned earlier. Rob?
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned earlier, the design and conservation officer didn't particularly like this, so if you're in the room, could you... Hello. Would you be like to expand on the considerations you've already put into this report?
So it was more a case that I didn't like the fact that there was no detailed landscaping shown in that kind of area, rather than completely against it, shall we say. It was kind of like the lack of detail was the problem. And there's kind of like a thing about having hedges about 3 or 5 metres, and at the same time, then also having them 1 metre. And there's different ways of managing hedgerows, such as flailing them, which does nothing for the kind of ecology and things, where there's also kind of naturally laying hedges. It's just that lack of detail about what's going on, and we've had this for 2 years.
Anyone else? Emma?
Sorry, Chair. I've just added to my list of things that members have been discussing as we've gone through the debate and the questioning of speakers. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation around loss of agricultural land, so do give that consideration if that's one of the harms that you're saying collectively isn't outweighed by those benefits that have been cited. So I just would need to have a clear understanding of each of those harms. Thank you.
Steve?
Right, I'm going to jump in. Both feet. I've got a bucket on my head. I move to refuse on the grounds of loss of agricultural land, visual impact, environmental impact, Do you want more, or is that it?
Add more in, Steve.
Oh, Bob's on it now.
The impact of the local businesses, loss of jobs, and also very important, the security reasons.
Chair, if I could just come back and ask for some clarification on environmental impact. Are you talking about the visual impact arising from the development specifically, Councillor Cox?
Yes, and the construction impact, the surface water, where's that going to go? What's it going to do? I know it's in there, but there's a lack of clarity over it. Yeah, rural landscape.
So just a couple of things. Oh, sorry, Susie, do you want you jump in?
Sorry, if I might just pick up on that question of drainage. The drainage strategy is, for the most part, acceptable. The reason that it's not currently in the list of proposed approved plans is that there are a couple of further surveys and pieces of work that need to be done, but a condition is recommended to secure those details, so we would have that detail at the condition stage.
Chair, if I might just add to that, just to cover off two of the points that were mentioned there. Councillor Anderson, you mentioned lack of security. What I would say is I don't think that would be a defensible ground of refusal, given that that's capable of being dealt with by condition. I think the point is that the purported level of security needed for the site would in itself cause a visual impact in its own right. But I think to deal with just the potential for there being a security risk wouldn't be a sustainable ground of refusal. I also don't think that any ground of refusal should specifically reference loss of jobs, because there's no direct evidence to suggest that would happen. I think the case in terms of the impact on the farm shop and tea rooms is more about the amenity impacts arising from that. There may well be a knock-on impact in terms of jobs further down the line, but that's not evidence that we have at this stage. So I'd recommend that that's not included as a ground of refusal.
Steve? Just observation I made when we went to the conservation area. I think a couple of houses down there had solar panels on it, and I didn't hear anybody moaning about that. So it does show that putting a field full of solar panels has the effect that we've got around the room now. When you put them on houses, it doesn't seem to have the same effect. It's just one of my observations. Right, if no more committee members want to ask any questions, and no officers have got anything to add. Emmett?
Just to labour the point, I will just read again so that we can be absolutely sure what the grounds are. We have to obviously put that in a decision notice to the applicant. They will have a right of appeal against that decision, and it will be those grounds that we're defending in the event of an appeal. So appreciate it's tedious and we've been at it for a long while, but it is important that we get it absolutely right. So my understanding is impact on the green belt by virtue of the fact that it's inappropriate development in the green belt and the harm caused to openness, loss of agricultural land, the visual impact arising from the panels on the rural landscape, the amenity impacts on nearby neighbours, including the farm shop and Grange House. Those harms taken collectively aren't clearly outweighed by the benefits that you've seen in the papers in terms of the generation of energy, the very significant weight that is afforded in national policy to the generation of renewable energy. You've seen those in your papers. Your view collectively as a committee is that those benefits are not clearly outweighed by the harms that you've identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Right, we're ready to make a decision. Is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to the imposition of planning conditions and a Section 106 agreement to secure habitat enhancement monitoring costs? Is there a mover? I say the same again, but are we going to reject this application? Propose it, seconder. So Steve proposed, Chris second to reject it. I'll move the vote then to reject. Please indicate by raising your hand if you are rejecting this application. Unanimous. That looks like it's a unanimous one. So just to confirm, that's been rejected, that application for the solar farm at Mar. Right, we'll adjourn this meeting so that people can swap places and we can set everything up. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We're on to application number 2, 24/01404/FULM, proposed residential development with public open space, access, landscaping and associated infrastructure at land south east of Old Road, Conisbrough, Doncaster. Mel Roberts. So it's going to be Emma. That was a test. I didn't recognise her from behind. Emma, if you want to start this off in Mel's absence, it'll be appreciated.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm sorry that you've got me again rather than Mel, unforeseen circumstances, so you're going to have to bear with me while I juggle the two computers. So I'll just transfer over to the presentation and we'll get started. Thanks, Chair. Thank you. Okay. So just kicking off, I'll just give you an update on pre-committee amendments for this. This is an application for proposed residential development with public open space access and landscaping and associated infrastructure at land off Old Road, Conisbrough. We have requests to speak from Councillor Rachel Reid, who will be speaking in opposition. And then we've got Rachel Martin from ID Planning, who will be speaking in support of the application. We also have Rob Harding from Vistry, Wayne Walk, who's an engineer, and Phil Owen from Highways, who are also in attendance to answer any questions should members have them. So as I say, the application seeks planning permission for the erection of 226 dwellings on land off of Old Road, Conisbrough. The proposal includes a mix of properties with 6 bungalows, 14 2.5-storey houses, and the remainder being 2 storeys. The site comprises a triangular parcel of land situated on the edge of Conisbrough. There are 4 semi-detached dormer bungalows and the Hilltop Public House to the west of the site, residential development to the east, and open countryside to the north and south. Members also visited this site and the surrounding area last Thursday. So the land is currently open and undeveloped and has a gradual slope falling from the northwest to the southeast with a level change of around 15.5 metres across the site. And the topography plan shown here just gives that indication of how the site graduates from Old Road down towards Sheffield Road. 2 vehicular access points are proposed to enter the site from Sheffield Road, and the footway will be widened 2 metres along the whole of this site frontage. In terms of the detailed proposed access arrangements, these are shown here in terms of the eastern access, and we do have technical highways officers here in the room to answer any questions you might have about those proposals in detail when we get into the debate portion of the meeting. In terms of Old Road, we travelled along Old Road for those members who were in attendance at the meeting on Thursday. So just some photographs showing its current condition adjacent to the site. What's proposed along Old Road is a 2-metre wide footpath that's proposed to be provided along the whole of the site frontage along Old Road. And in terms of the site plan and the layout proposed here, there are proposed to be 4 areas of open space to be provided across the site, 2 of which are proposed to have play areas included on them. Houses around the perimeter of the site maintain adequate separation distances with existing properties, and a cycle path is proposed along the northern boundary of the site. So although not a policy requirement to provide bungalows here, 2 are provided in the northernmost corner and 4 at the western end of the site, and that's to ensure that they tie in terms of built form with the existing semi-detached dormer bungalows situated adjacent to the site. And this is just a site section to demonstrate how that would appear on the ground. And in terms of other typical house types, we've got a mixture, as I say, of bungalows and then 2 and 2.5-storey dwellings. They're proposed to be finished in brick and render. The exact details to be secured by condition. All the dwellings proposed meet the NDSS standards and comply with the policy requirements for M42 and M43 properties. In terms of the principle of the development, as we've set out in the report, the application site is allocated for residential development within the adopted development plan. And as we've set out in the papers, the allocation identifies an indicative capacity of 200 dwellings, but it's important to remember that that's not a maximum figure, that's not a ceiling. More can be provided on the site, provided all of the other policy requirements are met. And we've set that out in detail in the report. In terms of nearby facilities, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this plan, so apologies, but this is just demonstrating that the site's in a sustainable location. It's close to schools, shops and other facilities. In terms of the landscape master plan, the layout's been designed specifically with houses fronting onto both Sheffield Road and Old Road. The streets are to be tree-lined and hedges and trees are proposed along the edges of the site to soften the impact on the surrounding countryside. So there's a graduation in terms of the visual impacts of the development through that landscaping. Again, these are a little bit faint, so my apologies for that, but this is just a series of site sections for you to see to account for the sloping nature of the site. This is an important consideration for us. We've assessed that these site sections indicate that the proposal is acceptable in terms of ensuring that design is acceptable, so buildings don't appear overly dominant when they're on the higher parts of the site, but also so that amenity between the properties is acceptable in terms of overshadowing and overlooking. And that's just another section there which further demonstrates that. In terms of open space, the proposals include a LEAP, so that's locally equipped area of play, and a LAP, which is a local area of play, to be provided on the site to cater for all age groups. What we've explained in the report is that the scheme exceeds the policy requirement for open space provision, the 19% rather than the 15% requirement. In terms of highways, the site's located in close proximity to bus stops, and members that were on the site visit noted these in proximity to the site as we travelled around. The scheme provides good pedestrian access with links to the surrounding area. It's been assessed by highways officers in all respects and deemed to be acceptable. So there will be a contribution of £19,702.28 towards improvements at junction 36 of the A1M. A further £35,643.85 travel bond and £6,000 towards recalibration of traffic light signals, and those will be secured by Section 106 agreement. The site is located in flood zone 1, so the least likely to flood. The applicant has demonstrated that infiltration is not possible. It's not possible to discharge to a watercourse, and so surface water will be discharged into the sewer. So what's proposed is an underground attenuation tank in the large open space area in the corner of the site, and that will ensure that discharge is controlled to a suitable level agreed with Yorkshire Water, and that will mean that surface runoff will be less than if the site remained as an undeveloped greenfield site. Some suds will be incorporated into the design, including swales within the open space areas and water butts. The drainage strategy has been agreed with both our internal drainage team and Yorkshire Water, and again we have drainage colleagues here with us should you have any technical questions for them today. Briefly on air quality, an air quality assessment has been submitted and shows that the impact on air quality will be acceptable both during operation and construction phases of development. Dust mitigation measures, such as a named point of contact for any dust complaints, will ensure that it's controlled during construction phase. A travel plan will promote sustainable transport and reduce reliance on car use, and as part of our assessment and consultation processes, the air quality officer here at the council has raised no objections to the proposals. And just to touch on viability and planning obligations, The application's accompanied by a viability assessment, and that's been independently checked and confirmed that the site is not viable with the full policy asks. The scheme does exceed the open space requirements, and there will be those contributions towards highway improvements that I've mentioned previously. But what the Section 106 would also do is require the developer to reappraise viability both at halfway point and then again towards the end of the build out to see whether any further contributions can be made towards affordable housing, secondary school provision, greenbelt compensation, monitoring of off-site habitats and upgrading of bus stops. And that, as I say, will be enshrined in the Section 106 agreement, and that's what the local plan policy indicates we should do in these circumstances. So to summarise, the site's located for housing in the local plan and is in a sustainable location. The scheme has been shown to be unviable but does provide for some policy requirements, and a review mechanism within the Section 106 will allow for possible further contributions to be made should viability improve further down the line. All other matters have been resolved during the course of the assessment, including those cited on the previously refused application, and we make reference to that in the papers. And there are no material considerations to outweigh the local plan allocation. And on that basis, planning permission is recommended to be granted subject to a 106 agreement and the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mel. We have received a request to speak from Councillor Rachel Reid, Ward Member, in opposition to the application. Rachel, this is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute your microphone when you have concluded your submission. When you're ready, please.
Chair, members of the committee, I am objecting to this application in my capacity as Ward Councillor for Conisbrough. This proposal is not a minor or technical matter. It is a large-scale development of 226 homes on a sensitive settlement edge, and it comes before you failing multiple core local plan policies and national policy tests, with several key impacts either unresolved or deferred to future review. I will focus on 7 main areas: affordable housing, flooding, highway safety, pressure on local services, overdevelopment and character, greenbelt loss and biodiversity impact. Firstly, affordable housing. This scheme delivers 0 affordable homes. Doncaster Local Plan Policy 7, affordable housing, is clear. Developments of this scale are required to deliver 15% affordable housing, which equates to 34 homes on this site. That policy exists to meet identified housing need and to ensure mixed and balanced communities. Instead, we are being asked to approve a scheme that offers nothing up front and relies entirely on future viability reviews, a clawback mechanism that provides no certainty that affordable housing will ever be delivered. This approach conflicts with Local Plan Policy 7 and the MPPF paragraph 63, which requires affordable housing to be delivered where need is identified unless robustly justified. Members should be very clear. Approving this application means accepting permanent non-compliance with Policy 7 at the point of decision. That deserves significant negative weight in the planning balance. Secondly, flooding and drainage. Flood risk was a reason for refusal in 2023, and these concerns have not been resolved. The site has a 15.5 metre fall, creating rapid surface water runoff towards existing homes downhill. The drainage strategy relies heavily on attenuation tanks beneath open space, with no clear long-term maintenance or failure contingency. This conflicts with Local Plan Policy 57, flood management risk, and the MPPF paragraphs 159 to 161, which require development to demonstrate it will not increase flood risk elsewhere. Residents downstream already experience flooding anxiety. Granting permission without absolute confidence on drainage would be irresponsible. Thirdly, highway safety and traffic. The proposal introduces 2 new junctions onto the A630, a road already known locally for congestion and collision risk. There is no meaningful cumulative impact assessment, despite multiple other developments consented in the wider area. This conflicts with Local Plan Policy 56, Transport and Accessibility, and the MPPF paragraph 116, which allows refusal where residual cumulative highway impacts would be severe. In my view, the pedestrian and road safety risks here clearly meet that threshold. Fourthly, pressure on local services. 226 homes will bring hundreds of new residents, yet this application secures no GP or healthcare contribution, no dental provision, limited education mitigation that does not address wider capacity pressures. This conflicts with the Local Plan Policy 61, Health and Wellbeing, and the MPPF paragraph 96, which requires access to sufficient community facilities and services. Development should not be permitted where existing infrastructure is already overstretched. Fifthly, overdevelopment and character impact. This site forms a sensitive settlement edge. Despite a minor reduction in unit numbers, the density remains high and erodes Conisbery's semi-rural character. This conflicts with Local Plan Policy 41, Design Quality, and the MPPF paragraph 135, which requires development to be sympathetic to local character, landscape setting and settlement
1 minute.
form. Once this edge is urbanised, it's lost permanently. Sixthly, greenbelt loss and compensation. Members must give significant weight to the permanent loss of greenbelt land. Sorry, I thought I got 10 minutes. Chair members, this application is not policy compliant, relies heavily on uncertainty and defers too many critical obligations to future review. It conflicts with the local plan and the MPPF on affordable housing, flood risk, highway safety, social infrastructure, design, greenbelt protection and biodiversity. Approval at this stage would place the community at risk while offering no guarantee that promised mitigation will ever materialise. For those reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to refuse the application or at the very least defer it until these issues are properly resolved and policy compliant contributions are secured. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Committee members, would anybody like to ask questions? Bob?
Yeah. Hi, Councillor Reid. You mentioned congestion on Sheffield Road. Could you just give me an idea on what sort of congestion, how congested it gets?
Can you use your mic, please?
It's the main road from the Rotherham to Doncaster, and at the bottom you've got the traffic lights which takes you up to Clifton, or you can go left to Denby. It is very busy. There has been accidents there, and there's been a lot of near misses as well, and they don't stick to the speed limit on there. So I think it's a 40, forgive me if I'm wrong, is it 40? But there's a lot of the time they don't do 40.
And you do know there has been accidents on the regular accidents, yeah?
Any more questions, committee? No? We have received a request to speak from Rachel Martin from ID Planning in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press a large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you have concluded your submission. Mr. Rob Hardy, Mr. Wayne Walk and Mr. Phil Owen are also in attendance to answer any technical questions. Is that still the case? Right, when you're ready to start, just press your red button. Thank you.
Many thanks. Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. The application delivers a high-quality, sustainable scheme providing a mix of new homes that will see the comprehensive development of the site, which is allocated for housing in the adopted local plan. The principle of development is acceptable, and your officers have concluded the overall design, character, appearance, layout and landscaping of the scheme would result in a high standard of housing that would protect the amenity of existing residents in accordance with the policy and guidance. We acknowledge that some residents and members have commented on specific matters which your officer has addressed fully in the report, but will briefly address these now. In regard to affordable housing, this is required by policy subject to viability, and it has been demonstrated and independently reviewed that the scheme is not viable. I'll come to that again shortly. In relation to flood risk and drainage, the application is accompanied by a flood risk and drainage assessment. The site is in flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk of flooding. The development incorporates sustainable drainage and proposes to store surface water on site before discharging to the public sewer at rates agreed with Yorkshire Water. The storage of water on site and restricted discharge will reduce the overall risk of flooding in downstream areas. The LLFA and Yorkshire Water have no objections in relation to flood risk or drainage. In terms of increased traffic, the application is supported by a transport assessment, which demonstrates the existing network can accommodate the development traffic without severe impacts. Your officers have reviewed the technical documents and have no objections to the proposed development, subject to mitigation and conditions. In terms of local amenities and social infrastructure, as detailed in your officer's report, health infrastructure is funded via central funding. We acknowledge that some planning obligations cannot be delivered at this stage due to viability constraints, and this has been independently verified by the Council's consultant. However, the Section 106 agreement includes 2 formal review points during construction. This means that if the scheme becomes more viable, additional contributions for affordable housing, education, and other policy areas will be secured. This approach ensures that every opportunity is taken to deliver further planning obligations while allowing much needed homes to come forward now. The applicant has worked closely with your officers to deliver a policy compliant scheme, delivering 226 new homes on an allocated site to meet local plan targets. We urge members to follow the recommendation of your officers and grant consent accordingly so that development can commence in the new year. I do have members of my team here today. We've got Wayne Walker, who can answer questions on flood risk, Phil Owen on highways, and Rob Hardy from Vistry. Many thanks.
Thank you. Committee, would anybody like to ask... calm down. Ask the applicant and any of the colleagues questions. Got Steve first, then Rob, then Chris.
Thank you. It's a very easy one. What makes it unviable?
Yeah, since so there was an application on this site in 2021, but since then build costs have risen sharply, and sales values have not kept pace. So those 2 factors alone have put a lot of pressure on the viability of the scheme.
So because building costs have gone up, which we can assume they're going to go up while there's more demand for building, the cost of labour and everything else is going to go up. What makes you think that at any point it's going to be viable, that then the 106 can be amended?
I can't really answer that question. That's not something for me to forecast, hence why we've got the 2 junctures at which we can review the mechanism, obviously halfway and almost at the end of the build period, to give us the maximum amount of time or opportunities to kind of capture any sort of changes in build cost or sales revenues. The viability reappraisal will also look at abnormal costs as well. So obviously we've put costs in for how much we think things are going to cost. And obviously once we get on site, there may be savings there. So obviously that'll be captured in those reappraisals.
So what you're saying is that you've submitted an application that you know to be unviable. Why not submit an application that would be viable? Or are you saying that to make some kind of a profit, you need this amount of properties on this land? I'm really confused, because what we've got is the potential of, and I'm not saying all developers, but quite a few developers could come with an unviability statement that then mitigates them from doing any other contribution within the local area.
Yeah, all I can say on that really is it's tested on a site-by-site basis. We obviously submit our viability assessment, but that is ratified by a council consultant that's independently chosen by the council, and they kind of corroborate what we've submitted. So it doesn't, or it wouldn't, in my opinion, open up that kind of avenue for that to happen on individual sites. Obviously, you would have to follow policy like we have done, and then go through the viability process. And obviously, every site will be judged on their own merits and the information that's submitted.
Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Why does a developer want to build on an unviable site?
So, as per like the committee report, when we say unviable, there's obviously mechanisms or considerations within the viability assessment where there has to be, or there's an agreed level of return. So what the unviable means is with the additional costs or planning obligations, that rate of return would be less than what would be agreed between the two parties. So that's what we mean by unviable. So it's not that there isn't any sort of, you know, economic benefit to the developer. It's just in terms of what is expected within that kind of context. That's where there's an impact. So that's why we still want to get on. We're committed to building homes on this site. It's obviously been, allocated, and this is the second application type thing. So, Vistry are committed to building new homes. We've just had to explore that avenue to kind of get there.
So to use your words, the profit that the developer gets is that 15%-ish markup, but because of that, the developer then can't provide any of the matters related in the local plan policies. So the community then doesn't profit. The community doesn't get the equivalent of 2.290 million for a commuter sum towards affordable housing. The community doesn't get £841,000 towards secondary school provision, doesn't get compensation of 50k towards Greenbelt, doesn't get 6k for 30 years monitoring of significant on-site habitat gains, and doesn't get 40k for upgrading of bus stops on Maple Grove and Sheffield Road, unless there's this clawback mechanism, which I highly doubt will provide any fruit, because if you're going to work to a profit margin, the developer will work to that profit margin and won't eke out anything for the community. My question is, what benefit does this application provide to the residents in Conisbrough?
Yeah, I mean, just taking obviously the comments on the viability, I accept it's, it's a tough ask, really, but there is the reappraisal mechanisms for that. Obviously, I can't sit here today and say, what the outcome of those are, but we have discussed this and agreed with officers that, the approach to kind of revisit that in the future. In terms of the benefit, there's 226 new homes to be delivered on an allocated housing site. There is 19.5% of the site will be delivered as open space. There's a leap, there's a lap. There are those benefits outside of the planning obligations.
Sorry, I'm gonna come back. It's something I should have picked up with the ward councillor, but my assumption is that Conisbrough would definitely value having extra affordable housing in the ward. They'd also there's a clear demonstrable need for more provision at the secondary school as well, and that won't happen from this development when it's needed. I don't think there's anything further you can add to that comment, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we're all struggling with this lack of viability. I mean, you are providing a product. You know how much that product will cost you to make. You then put a markup on that product. So you're making a commercial profit. I just can't understand how you would put together a project that isn't viable. I mean, you must know how much it costs to build a house. It's your business. Is it because of the requirements that you must fit solar panels? Is it partly because of the requirements they must be heat pump ready? Are there some factors that you don't normally come across that are particular with this particular project that brings its viability into question? I just can't understand any business putting forward a project that isn't viable. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Maybe you could go into that a bit more.
Thank you.
Chris, can you get Mike?
Thank you. I think it has to be said that it's it's a standard mechanism now, and your policies allow for and recognise the viability process that is carried out. So it's recommended in national planning policy guidance, and there's policies within your local plan that enable development and require policies and all sorts of requirements subject to viability. And the viability process is one in which I think your officer has set out really clearly in paragraph 7.98 of your report. It talks a lot about the viability considerations, and the process is the developer can set out the viability. So they set out how much the land costs, how much it's going to cost to develop, and how much houses in the area sell for. And when those sums are carried out, when that formula is carried out and all the sums are put in place, it is nationally accepted that there has to be a developer's profit of between 10 and 15%. That's set out really clearly in your officer's report. We did that report, and the report shows there is, I can't remember, between 10 and 15% profit. Now that is accepted that is what a developer is allowed to take home. If they weren't going to get any profit, if they weren't going to get anything at all, nobody would build any houses. So there has to be some profit. So what the viability does is it says, okay, these are the sums. The profit is 10 to 15%, but that is based on developing the house, developing the site, building the houses, selling at the rates that are currently known to be sold in the Conisbrough area or whichever area is local to a particular site. Now so in this instance, it has been demonstrated that the developer can build the houses and is likely to sell them, but there isn't any money left in the pot to support the education contribution or the delivery of affordable houses. Now that information and that report has been sent to the council. The council have instructed an independent assessor to look through that and check all the figures, which are all the figures and assumptions based on how much it's going to cost to put in the drainage sustainably, how much it costs to build the buildings, how much it costs for, all the fees, all the developer costs. And your independent assessor has agreed with all those sums. And what's come out at the end of it is, yes, everybody recognises, and it's very clear in the report, that affordable housing can't be provided at this time and education can't be provided at this time. But there are some other contributions. The highways, there are contributions being made to highways. We are delivering a high quality scheme. We are putting biodiversity net gain on there. We are putting on open space and leaps and play equipment and things like that. Now, the point of regeneration is that hopefully this development helps to regenerate Conisbrough, and it helps to increase house values, and it helps to support regeneration. So the idea with the two mechanisms to review it during the build programme is that hopefully house prices do increase a little bit, or the houses are really, really popular and are being sold for a bit more, so that there is then, the viability is reappraised, and there is then it's demonstrated that some contributions can be made. But clearly, we have to take a point in time, and that is what this viability is assessed on at this point in time. And at the minute it says no contributions, but we have worked with your officers and your legal team to ensure that those triggers are in place to enable a reassessment in the future. And that's kind of where we're at.
Right, thank you. That makes it substantially clearer, I think. So bottom line is, you cannot build houses that match the price of existing houses, house for house, because the house prices at the moment are quite subdued, and Doncaster is a low value area, if you like, for houses. Conisbrough certainly is. And it's impossible to build a house that is commercially viable in that area. So the entire development rests on house prices in Doncaster and Conisbrough raising to a level that make this development viable. So the issue isn't with the development, the issue is with the house prices in Doncaster.
No, I'd say the scheme is viable in terms of it can be built and houses will be sold. However, it is not viable to provide all the additional contributions that are requested here, and the local plan policies accept that contributions cannot be provided if it is demonstrated that a scheme is not viable in terms of doesn't make a developer profit over 15% or 12%, whichever one it is. That is, so the houses can be built.
Jon.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of viability, to me it sounds very much like I'm driving a car. It's not viable for me to purchase car insurance due to the rise in cost, and I'm just not gonna get it. So I know that's not a legal requirement for you to adhere to those viability conditions, but then again, they are a requirement. And when you say it's not viable, that tells me that you should simply let somebody else do that. Because at the end of the day, you're saying it's not affordable. Okay, I've seen plenty of stores close in a certain place in city, and another business person came along and opened up something else, and they did it better for a better price and complied with the requirements and the asks that people of Doncaster and Conisborough have. So to be honest, I'm swaying towards against. The against team is pretty much winning the argument here. So if I know this is not necessarily a question, but I'm just trying to understand if you could expand on why the viability is not being met. Because at the end of the day, I'm looking at certain figures, and you're saying that the green space allocated and provided will be a bit bigger than required. Okay, just make that the standard, and then provide some contributions. So this is pretty much what I'm. If you could expand as to why the project had to go the way it had to go, and not comply with the requirements that Doncaster has.
Thank you. I don't really know if there's much more I can add. The policies in your plan requiring education contributions and affordable housing, all those policies in the plan, the policy says subject to viability. We have provided a report that shows, and your council officers have requested an independent assessor to look at this, who have agreed it is not viable to offer those contributions at this time. And that is because of the viability assessment. I don't carry it out, I'm sorry, I'm not the viability assessor here, which shows that those contributions can't be met. It doesn't meet the requirements, the national requirements, in terms of how a viability assessment is carried out. It does not give, the developer is allowed to take home an element of profit. In this instance, due to current values, which is what viability is based on, it cannot meet the developer return, and therefore those contributions are not viable. Now, yes, someone could come along and say, do you know what, I'm going to look at this site and I'm going to build 5 million, 20 million pound houses. It is unlikely they would ever be built because they will never get sold, because it's unlikely that 21 million pound houses are going to sell in that. That is how the viability appraisal is done. It's based on current realistic valuations of what a house can be sold at. So I don't really know. I don't know if the officer can step in here and explain the process a bit more clearly from their point of view. But from my point of view, your policies are subject to viability, and it has been demonstrated and accepted that subject to the viability appraisal requirements and national requirements of how they are carried out, it has been shown that it is not viable to offer the contributions that are being requested, and that is in accordance with your policies.
On the back of that, I will address the same question to our officers as well. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Rob.
Thank you, Chair. I think I understand the developer's point of view with the fallback on the policies, and that there is a mechanism by which you can have the negotiation with the planning officers and come to an agreement in regards to the viability statement. We, as ward councillors, we represent the people of Doncaster. It's the people of Doncaster, and specifically Conisbrough, that will suffer because of the lack of provision from this application. If I was from Conisbrough, I wanted to move to this new development, and I had a school child who was going into secondary school, which secondary school would they go to? Because there's a lack of places at De Warren.
I don't have that information to hand, sorry. I'm sure it's in your officer's report.
I'll ask officers when the time comes. If I was a person who required affordable housing for whatever reason, where would I live in Conisbrough who wanted to stay there?
So I don't know if you're aware, but Vistry is a multi-tenure developer, and whilst the exact tenure mix hasn't been confirmed yet, it is likely that there will be an element of affordable housing delivered on this scheme. So there's obviously the Section 106 request mechanism, but there are also other routes to deliver affordable housing. So whilst I can't confirm the quantum, there could potentially be an element of affordable as part of this scheme.
Could you expand on that? Because don't say anything about affordable housing in here, so I'm just confused as to why that's now been brought out.
Yeah, no problem. So there are obviously policy requirements for affordable housing, but there are other ways to deliver affordable housing through registered providers and so on that kind of work with Homes England grant funding and so on. So that Vistry would potentially work with a partner and potentially deliver a quantum of affordable housing outside of the local plan policy requirement.
There's a lot of vagueness in there, and so I'm going to take it as there is no affordable housing because that's what it says in the pack, and it can't be demonstrably justified that there will be. But I take the point that there could be other classifications of affordable housing on the site.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Craig.
Yeah. What sort of prices are these houses going to be sold at? And roughly what are they going to cost to build?
That's included within the viability assessment, and it's public information. It's on the public access. I couldn't tell you exactly what the build cost and revenues are, but again, all I can say is in terms of the process, the build cost was agreed with the council valuer and the revenues also. So there would have been a market report that kind of sat along the viability assessment that reviewed and suggested what revenue for each house type there would have been. I don't have that exact. I don't have the costs in front of me, but they were included within the viability assessment. That's on public access.
Any more questions? Committee. Just a quick question. If you did the open space down to the 15%, and you crammed as many houses on there as you possibly could, what sort of difference would it make in terms of your viability?
I couldn't say, to be honest, Council. I wouldn't be able to speculate. Obviously, there's a chicken and egg there in terms of like, would the build costs in that area offset with the revenues for those houses offset the build costs in that area? Because you've also got to bear in mind it's not just like the cost of building the house. There's also the engineering works that kind of go in there. Obviously, we've touched on the site constraints and so on. So yeah, I couldn't speculate, I'm afraid.
So just one more as well. I think we said that we're looking at halfway through the build and towards end of build for reviewing. How far into build do you think you'll be able to yourself recognise whether the viability is going to be different to what you thought was initially the position?
to be fair, halfway is probably a good spot there, because we'd have commenced, we'd have started selling. We'd also have a good handle on abnormal costs and how things are going there. Build costs, obviously, we'd have a good picture on that in terms of that kind of time scale in like a year, maybe a year and a half's time. So it would be around about the halfway mark.
And because it's a new build, how many houses would you expect to be seen off plan, literally in sales office before anything's even been dug up? When would you start to expect orders to be coming in for best houses on there? How many would you expect to be seeing in, say, first 3 months of the development starting?
Yeah, it's in terms of off plan, that's kind of quite unusual. Usually you need at least like the show house and a bit of activity on the site before you can kind of build up some interest in the scheme. So you'd be on site and at least building the first few plots before you'd kind of have an idea of take up.
Reason I'm asking is that when you look at planning portal for Conisbrough, you're probably only new housing estate that's got planning permission on there. Everything else is like extensions or schools and stuff like that. So I think there'd be a lot of excitement from people actually having opportunity to build or buy a new build house in Conisbrough. So do you think you might be selling yourself a bit short on what the expectations are?
So it's not necessarily an expectation. Like the market report that sits in terms of the viability assessment is based on market knowledge of the market at the time. So it's not it's not a pessimistic view. If anything, it's as positive as it could be. And obviously we submit our market report, and then that's independently assessed by the council assessor. So the statement on revenues that has kind of underpinned the viability assessment isn't based on any sort of pessimism or optimism. It's based on the market now.
Chair, just before we continue, we've been going for 3 hours now. If we're going to continue, we'll need to move under Council Procedural 17.25 to continue with business.
Is the committee okay to finish this application off? Yeah. Yeah, I'll continue. Thank you. Right, so I think we've probably... Has anybody else got any more questions for the applicants before we go into debate? Officers, do you want to make any... highlight any problems before we go any further?
Chair, just very quickly, apologies for labouring some of the points here, just to make a few observations from the questions that have been asked of the applicant. You asked a very pertinent point about, well, if there's a viability issue, why not add to the number of units on the site and therefore increase the margins effectively? But what that would potentially do is create more impacts in terms of the character of the development, the impacts on the neighbouring sites, and actually you'd be looking at needing more contributions to mitigate the impacts of those additional units. The scheme is the scheme, and that's what we're required to assess at this point in time. The applicant said officers might be able to elaborate on some of the viability points that she made. She made them very eloquently, and I don't think there is much more I can add to what was said, other than I think there might be a little bit of confusion around term viability as opposed to profitability and deliverability of the site. So what we're looking at in terms of viability issues is the ability of the site to meet certain policy requirements at this point in time, which is why we're proposing the mechanism within the 106 to reevaluate viability at certain points. And what I would say in that respect to reassure members is when that information comes into us, that would then be independently assessed again. It's not a case that we would take that on face value. We would test that and make sure that we were happy with what that evidence was telling us at that point in time. So it's not a case that it's accepted and we move on. So I just wanted to make that point as a point of reassurance more than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Committee members, we'll go into debate now. Any questions for the officers? Bob?
Yeah, this is one for highways. Just on the back of the question I asked Councillor Reid, is there any information on accidents on Sheffield Road around that traffic light junction?
If you look in your pack, Councillor Anderson, 7.31, page 15, there is a list of your personal injury accident data, collision data, listing where accidents have occurred. There's also the same information within the transport assessment. The one thing that we would agree with was that collision data along the stretch of road on Sheffield Road, where the two junctions are being proposed, there are no collisions along that stretch. So in terms of collision data and safety then, where the proposals for the junctions are probably the safest part of the network that surrounds that development. In terms of his signals, is that down at Old Road? Yeah, I think that's right, yeah. So that's quite a distance away from, I would say it's about a mile away from the site, but it's a signalised junction, which will be, in terms of how signals are validated, then I think the money's been proposed is to look at the signals and the timings and do any adjustments or any improvements to the signals. So I think that's in terms of where you're looking at in this, in terms of signals as part of this development. Is that okay?
And I know it's something I brought up before, but just for clarity in this meeting, Sheffield Road's a busy road, so turning right into that access could be difficult. Was there any talk or anything about access from Old Road?
So we look at the proposals as the developer submits them. We look at and assess those proposals. We don't tell the developer how to and what to do in terms of how he wants to do the layout and any junctions onto the highway. What I would say is that the worst road in terms of collisions is actually Old Road rather than Sheffield Road. So we wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that proposal. It has been looked at, but we do look at the proposal as submitted by the developer. We don't take on designer duties at all. It's for the developer to submit their proposals. What I would add is that the Old Road junction with Sheffield Road at the top of the hill is again part of a cluster of collisions.
Rob?
Thank you, Chair. I'll go to education first. Where will secondary pupils go, if not to De Warren?
Okay, so the next nearest secondary schools where we have places would be in Borby, which is Astraea Academy, 5.5 miles. And then the alternative would be the Laurel, which is in Mexborough, which is 3.8 miles.
And what is the education department's view on that?
So in terms of the preference process, parents are able to make an express a preference. If that preference is refused, then they will be given the right of appeal.
Thank you. I do have another question. I'm just trying to read a bit more.
Jan?
Where exactly in Balby? Is it next to Alverley Lane?
It's off, yes, it's close to Alverley Lane, yes. It's deep into Balby.
Yeah, we had that discussion when the Alverley Lane development came along, and that doesn't click because the math doesn't add up right there. And I know that because I'm taking my daughter to about 20 minutes drive away because of that. So I don't even know where you get your maths on that one, but I'm just gonna ask a different question. It's just on the back of that. So I'm looking at the numbers here, and we're talking over 3 million in discount, right? In money that we're not basically getting due to the project not being viable and whatnot. Why are we doing that? Why are we approving projects that are not viable? Because at the end of the day, the damage is being done. I'm saying damage in quotes, because for the lack of a better term, we're developing this project, we're putting it down, we have an issue with the viability. There's stuff being done, and to mitigate the damage, we bring in over 3 million in contributions in terms of affordable housing and contribution to education and so on. And now we're not taking that money, and we're going ahead with the project. So I just want a response from the whole team as to why we're going ahead with this project. Thank you.
Emma, did you want to just add to that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll speak on behalf of the team. And it really goes back to what the applicant was saying when they were speaking earlier on. The policy that's in the local plan, its adopted policy, allows for this circumstance to occur, and that's supported by national policy as well. So where developments are found to not be viable in a way that means some of the contributions aren't able to be provided, then the policy allows for that to happen. But in the way that we're proposing here, where there are stages along the build out which allows for re-evaluation and obligations to be made at that point in time. So it's not the case that we're saying no, never, those contributions aren't going to happen. It's to allow that reassessment to take place at certain points of the project. And that's what the policy allows for.
Do correct me if I'm wrong, but is this basically because of a loophole?
No, absolutely no loophole. The policy was written entirely deliberately to allow for developments to come forward and for contributions to not effectively stymie that from happening, because we're required to build houses. There's a number that we're required to build, and we need to make sure that's happening. And it's probably just worth emphasising one particular part in Policy 65, which relates to development contributions in that respect, because it talks about the fact that proposals need to be planned in step with necessary supporting infrastructure and should make appropriate contributions towards that infrastructure. But it also overtly recognises that developments should not be subject to a scale of developer contributions or policy requirements that development viability is put at risk. And that's enshrined within that adopted policy. That would have been tested at examination before we adopted the local plan. So it's not by dint of an omission or any kind of accident. That was deliberately put in the local plan to ensure that developments could come forward in this way.
Again, this comes down to the project itself. When there's that initial discussion between them and you guys, and you're coming to a conclusion that yes, okay, let's go ahead with this thing. There's always a solution to whatever problem it is. So a different plan would have generated a different outcome. So why are we still going ahead with this? That's where it all starts, at the initial conclusion. So I'm trying to understand why. It's still not answered to me. I do apologize if I'm not getting it right. But why are we going ahead with this when it's not viable? We're literally not getting the benefits we're supposed to get, because we're asking every single other developer to bring forward those contributions, and we're not asking them. So I need a bit more clarification, sorry.
Chair, just to come back on that, and that actually touches on a point that Andy mentioned a moment ago. We are required to assess the scheme that's put before us. So this is the scheme we have to determine. We have to look at that in the round in terms of all of the policy requirements and make a recommendation to you on that basis. We've had the viability information submitted to us. We've had it independently tested, and that's why we're putting the recommendation to you now. If we were to go down the route of saying, right, we'll defer this application, we'll go ahead and we'll ask the developer to look at it again. This is an application we've already had in with us for a good couple of years now, and we've been doing that exercise. This is as good as we've been able to get things in terms of all of the issues that have come out of the consultation responses and our assessment. So this is the scheme that needs to be determined, and it's absolutely for the judgment of the committee to decide whether on all of the facts that you have before you, whether that's an approval.
So basically, if the project is deferred, then the developer has the option now to modify certain elements to bring it to a better shape.
Chair, they could. That's perfectly plausible that they could do that, but we have been working with them for a good couple of years to get it into this point, a point that we're happy to recommend it for approval to you. And what I would also say is that at this point in time, you could defer and they could appeal against non-determination, and then the decision's entirely taken out of your hands because they would go to the planning inspectorate and we wouldn't be making a decision at all. And I suspect that is what would happen in this case.
Can I just add to that first before you, Rob? One of the things that we might want to consider is whether 6 months or halfway through the projects, what we should be looking at in terms of validating whether it's still viable or not. It might be that we say it's a quarter way through, and if the applicants are happy with that and we're happy with that, that might be some way moving forward. I mean, we're not saying that we're going to turn this job off, but I get exactly what all committees saying, which is Doncaster Council's picking prices up for kids going to school. There's no facility for NHS, there's no dental stuff, there's lots of things that's going to cost Doncaster Council and NHS, where there's been no contribution from applicant. And I think it's clear that what we're saying is that ultimately we want to see some contribution. They're going to get 10, 15, 20% profit, which try put 100 grand in bank and see what you get back. You won't get nowhere near that. So they're getting a good return. All we're saying is that we should get our share to be able to provide facilities that they're going to be providing to their customers. We should be able to provide facilities that we want to give their kids and them people as well, besides their health, dentists, and whatever else they need. So yeah, I think you're all justified in what you're saying, and I think we might need to cut this a little bit different. Rob, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. Building from what Jorn and yourself said, I think the issues that we're discussing are sort of based from the plot allocation in the local plan, and that this site and a few other areas in Doncaster are classed as sort of lower rate for affordable housing. That's why this plot has got 15% required, whereas other plots have got 23% required. And because of that as well, that might feed into the potential house prices that then feed into the profitability and then viability. So I suspect that is why we come to where we are now, because the plot was allocated in local plan for housing for X amount, and it's got 15% affordable housing as a criteria. Because the local plan's a few years old, and because housing costs, everything else has ballooned over those years, it probably is that the data and information that got put into the local plan is outdated now from what we actually want to see and the benefits we want to see. And that is how come the developer is able, probably rightly so, to put forward this viability assessment and say, look, we can't afford this. That's not saying it's right or that it's acceptable to us. However, that is what the developer can do. A potential outcome from this beyond is sort of whether we can review the local plan sites that have this lower quality assessment put on them to see whether when those future applications come forward, they too will have the same viability question put on them, and Doncaster won't get the required contributions that it needs and wants to see from the local plan policy. And coming back to this application, I would be in favour of deferring on the basis that we see more information about the viability assessment, because I don't believe members have seen that. And the public information we've got on the local plan, this plot in the allocation, what we've got in the pack, that's really transparent, right? But I don't believe the viability assessment is as transparent as it can be. So whilst it might be frustrating, it might lead to the same outcome, I would be in favour of deferring so members can see that, and so it can inform our future thoughts on potential policy and potential applications that come forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. 1 minute, Jan. I mean, there's other ways of thinking about it as well. If you took it as Vistry have got more than one interest in Doncaster, if they turn around and says, well, the more profitable ones will take a cut out of that and contribute it towards this one, that'd be an interesting way of putting it. But you're dead right. It goes back to what we're saying, and we're doing local plans up for review, 2026. And these kind of questions we're asking now, we know for the next 15 years it's going to affect us even more. we've been short-sighted in some respects on the policies we've already got, and we need to be really open-minded when we do review local plan to what we're going to do moving forward. Emma, did you want to add to that before I open more questions?
No, that was really helpful. Thank you, Chair. And I completely agree that a lot of what Councillor Dennis has just spoken about there is for the local plan review, and absolutely those are things that we should be taking away and looking at. You also made an important point, Chair, around the periods for the review mechanism. So that is within the committee's gift to look at. So if you think that there is a more appropriate period of time in which to start reviewing the viability, then that's something that we can take away. If you were to resolve to grant planning permission subject to the review mechanism being at a certain point in time, in the alternative to what we've been proposing here, then that's absolutely something that you can do. And again, I would just reiterate the point that if you did go down the route of deferral, then you are in the realms of a non-determination appeal, and that's not said as a threat, but it's just to provide you with that information that you will be looking at a position where the planning inspectorate take this away. They will look at the review mechanisms that have been proposed in the draft 106. You will lose the ability to have any kind of say in that in the same way that you will if you're making a decision today. So I just wanted to be absolutely clear that that will be the consequence potentially of deferring.
Rob, is this in addition to what you've already asked?
Yes, it's a follow-on. Emma, could we have clarity on whether it is reasonable to ask for the viability assessment for us to view it? Because if it's not reasonable, then by all means, I won't suggest we defer. But if it's reasonable in planning terms for us to see it in the context of the wider local plan assessment, because this is the first time that this committee's seen a viability argument for reasons as to why we're not getting the money. So I'd pitch that as a reasonable enough justification as to why to defer.
Yeah, legal might want to come in and say something on this, but I'll start off. I think committee absolutely needs to have the information that it thinks it needs in order to make a decision, and that's a reasonable position to come to if that's what you decide. What I would say is you've got two sets of very, very technical pieces of information. The report that we had commissioned runs into the hundreds of pages, and it is very technical, and that's why we get someone independent to do that for us, because we're not the topic experts. So what I would say is that it goes back to the conversation that we have a lot in committee, is taking the views of the technical experts into account and using their advice. There is no judgment call in any of that. They've verified what's been said by the applicant's viability consultant, and they've done a really very thorough and detailed job in doing that. And as I say, that runs into hundreds of pages. So there's nothing to say you'd be unreasonable in going down that route if you wanted to see more information on viability, but I would question what would be to be gained from it.
Just listen to legal first, yeah.
Thank you. And if I could just add further to that, paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework, subsection C, requires decision makers to approve development proposals that accord with an up-to-date development plan without delay. And if we just go to policy 66 of our local plan, I'll read it out in full. So where the applicant can demonstrate that particular circumstances justify the need for a viability appraisal, the council will take a pragmatic and flexible approach to planning obligations and consider their genuine impact on viability of development proposals on an independent and case-by-case basis, at the applicant's expense and in line with the following principles. So A, development which is unable to make the full contribution at the point at which the application is submitted, it may be supported where, and there's three subsections here. 1, a robust and fit for purpose viability assessment shows that the full contribution would make the development unviable. 2, the possibilities for reduced, deferred or phased contributions have been fully explored. And 3, it can be demonstrated that the wider benefits of the scheme outweigh its lower level of contribution. The second part relates to reappraisal, so where a lower level of contribution is agreed initially for large-scale sites, which will develop out over multiple phases, this may be subject to reassessment once the development commences and or at any other suitable trigger points as appropriate and agreed between the council and the applicant. Now, obviously the point has been raised about deferral. I just ask you to think about, as I've said about policy, paragraph 11 of the NPPF, If there is a proposal that is in accordance with an up-to-date policy, it should be approved without delay. So obviously please have a think about whether the policy is up to date, and if it is, we need to be thinking about whether a decision can be made today. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, before I know other members have wanted to come in. Having reflected on what officers have said, I understand the arguments and the points they're making about the information that's provided today is enough to make a decision on. It might not be the fullest picture of what we would necessarily want to see, but we should trust the technical expertise that's been provided as part of the viability assessment. And Emma, I get your point about hundreds of pages. We won't properly trawl through that and understand it. However, it would be useful to see it after the application has been assessed, so that we can then go through it as a planning committee for future work on viability assessment. So my suggestion of deferment is ignore that, please. Thank you.
I'll just add to that. Last Thursday we should have probably asked that question. So first time we've seen viability, which is obviously new to everybody here, or certainly the newer councillors. When you see it in future, you get the opportunity to be able to ask for that information. It could have been given to us last Thursday as an appendices or whatever it is, and we would have been more educated. I don't think for 1 minute that any officers are trying to hoodwink us into believing that it's viable and they're getting brown envelopes, as they used to say in old days. I don't think that's happening by any means. What I do think is that they do a thorough job. I think we can make a change by suggesting a shorter lead time for the first, and it might be that we have to work with him, I'm not going to say daily, but certainly not necessarily a quarter of the way through and a halfway through. We can make that decision now, what we think's viable, in terms of us making sure that the transparency is there, that as soon as the opportunity comes for us to put his hand in their pockets to be able to help education and the junctions and everything else that we've seen as required, then I'm sure they want to see himself for £1 million each. They'll be chucking monitors, but until they are selling for £1 million each, I'm afraid we've just got to accept that as it stands today with policy. That's what we do. I think we're all learning from this. It's certainly local plan. We need to make sure that we question it. We need to make sure that if there's any opportunity to change the local plan going forward, so things like this don't occur again, then don't forget this. We need to be asking all the right questions to get all that information. But yeah, so next, Jan. Steve, I think you're next.
Thank you. It's just with Rob, obviously you've withdrawn, which is fine. But can you tell me, Emma, about where you're on about not making the decision? Are we time limited? Are we up to the time for a deferment? Because we know that a deferment could happen for extra information that would enable us to make that decision. But when we're talking now about, obviously it's been retracted, but if we're talking about it being no decision made, then where are we? Because it's not no decision made, it's asking for more information. So that surely, and we've done it before, with education have done it before, which again, it's along the same lines, it's about education, but from a different angle, if you like. And we know that the places are needed, aren't they? So, and they're needed yesterday. But all we were asking for is more information of why the contribution couldn't be given to school. That's it. And I mean, if it's unviable, my personal worry is that we are going to see, because of the changes to NPPF and all this other need to build stuff, is we're going to see more applications coming forward with unviable proposals that, because of our policies, we're going to have to put forward. So that, same as we've said already, we're going to end up with no school places. We're going to end up with them because it's in our policies. So you know, I just want a bit of clarity on it going to a Secretary of State for a decision when all we were asking for is information. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Chair. If I can come in. 2 points there, Councillor Cox. The first was around kind of setting a precedent for other developers to come forward and make the same claims and arguments through viability assessments. It's quite telling, I think, that this is the first time we've sat in this chamber as a group and had to have the conversation about viability. So the first occasion where the decisions needed to be made, because all of the other housing developments that have come forward for you to determine have all been policy compliant and found to be viable. So I would say that it's not necessarily the norm that developers would be arguing that, and it would also always be each case on its own merits. We see plenty of viability assessments come through the doors on other schemes that we're able to say through our independent consultants that they're not fit for purpose and argue that position, and we'd continue to do that. And as we've already said, there's mechanisms within the local plan review to look at what that policy says and how to take forward those requirements in the future. In terms of the position in terms of non-determination and where we go after today if we don't make a decision, so we're well outside the statutory determination period of 13 weeks, but what we've been doing is working proactively with the applicant to get a scheme that we've felt able to report and recommend approval to you, and that's what's before you today. But what that does mean is we've been able to agree up to this point extensions of time with the applicant to make a decision. That extension of time ends this week effectively because they're waiting for a decision on the outcomes of the planning committee. If we don't make a decision today, there is the right of appeal. We've been effectively put on notice that will happen, and then we're in the realms of the decision being taken out of our hands. That's entirely within the applicant's right to do that. And touching on the point that Michael made around reasonableness of withholding the decision, there is also a risk, of course, that if we end up in an appeal situation and we say to the inspectorate, well, we deferred the decision of the planning committee so that they could see more information on the viability case, the inspector could feel that that was unreasonable to have done. I think that that's unlikely, but you can never tell, and there would likely be an argument put forward by the applicant that we had been, given what we're recommending to you and what we've spoken about today.
When were the extension granted? And should this application have come to committee or a decision made before, or was it during this reevaluation of valuation? Do you know what I mean?
So generally how it works when we're agreeing extensions of time with applicants is that we look at the time frame we need to make our further assessment, to consult and to get a decision out, or in this case to programme in the committee. And so we work backwards from that point effectively. So the extension of time agreed for this week accounts for you making a resolution and then us being able to sign off on that decision subsequent to today. And that's quite standard. That's how we would normally work these things.
Any more questions, anybody? No. Anybody want to add on? Emily, complete.
Chair, just one point in terms of the resolution, we've set out in the report what the periods for review in a section 106 would be, but I'm hearing that members may want shorter timeframes for reviewing. So if they've got timeframes that they think would be reasonable that they want us to take forward in the 106, now would be the time to tell us so that we can enshrine that within the 106 if planning permission is granted.
Any contributions to that before we go into the vote? Any ideas? Are we going for a quarter? Rob?
I'd suggest after the first year of build out.
So are we saying that's like 35 houses? 50 houses? Chris?
Yeah, I mean, any alteration of this is obviously going to affect the viability. So it's very easy for us to say, oh, your year, 35 houses, 50 houses. If it's not viable at that point, what happens then? That would be my question.
For what it's worth, councillors, The current draft of the 106 requires that the re-evaluation is taken upon 50% occupation, and then again closer to what I believe is 90% occupation. I mean, if you're happy with that, I believe we might be able to proceed on that basis, but maybe if you've got an alternative of maybe something sooner, maybe 25, 10, 15% occupation, that may be something we can consider.
Jan?
Will it be reassessed at 25%, 50%, 75%, 90%, or is it a decision going to be made at 25% end of story?
I think this is the opportunity that we're setting now, is we can put some sort of rules in place for us to look at viability.
Basically what we're trying to do is make sure that the contribution is being done. So at the end of the day, if the contribution is done at the end of the project, that doesn't really matter. The contribution is still being done. So then if there's no point in doing 20 assessments and spending 20 times the money, when we can just do one assessment at the end of the project. If it's going to go ahead, it's going to go ahead, and it is what it is. And then we're going to assess it at the end of the project, see the profitability of it, and see if those contributions can be made and not spend that money 20 times. Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, this is my first planning committee.
No, just on that, the policy requirements is that the developer funds the cost of the council reviewing the reappraisal. Again, I just need to just confirm, we need to be considering what's a reasonable trigger point for reappraisal. And I think the other issue is that it also would need to be agreed with the developer themselves. It may be, as an alternative, maybe something that you wish to delegate to officers to consider, to try and agree an earlier reappraisal point. So grant planning permission subject to 106 with the officer, with the decision delegated to officers, if that's something that you wish to take forward.
Yeah, interesting what you said there, yeah, because what you're basically saying is that if we're going to do a profitability study on it, you might as well wait until it's finished. Wait until it's finished. You said that there's 5 million quid, you always X amount of pounds. What do you want to go, Chris?
Yeah, I was going to say much the same. I mean, it's easy for us to say, okay, we'll have a viability study at 33%, 66%. Could the developers stand that?
Emma?
I think the point we've got to with the Section 106 is that the developer has said that the 50% and the 90% are the thresholds that they would be accepting the re-evaluation. What I would say in response to the point of why not do it at the end and then we'll know for sure, because the triggers are based on occupation levels, you will start to get some impacts at the 50% point because you've got some people there. So it's important that we're looking at mitigating those impacts of occupation. So I don't think we would want to stand it all at the end, although I accept the logic, just so that we're making sure we are mitigating that level of occupation. So it sounds to me like on that basis, we'd be looking at keeping the 50% and the 90% based on what you've said, but perfectly, as Michael said, perfectly within your rights to say, well, if we're able to negotiate that down so that we're looking at a trigger sooner, then we can certainly take that away. Thank you.
What sort of price is it involved with viability study?
In terms of us assessing,
Made a point of saying that the applicant picks the cost up. So what sort of cost are they going to pick up?
so it depends on the complexity of the viability assessment. So they would submit the assessment to us and we would get it independently verified and checked. And that is generally around the £2,500 cost. It, as I say, that's a ballpark because it does depend on the specific nature of it.
Right, committee, then what are we doing before we go to vote? Are we looking for another stepping stone at, say, 25%? I'm looking at everybody here. We just stay with the 50%? Yes. Okay, we'll stop with the original plan then. Right then. Is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to the imposition of planning conditions and S106 legal agreement? Yeah. So, can we have reasons for alternative? What are we doing? Are we rejecting it? Looking at everybody here. Are we looking at deferring it? We've got three options. We accept, reject or defer. Which one do we want to do? Bob, what would you like to do? Defer. Anybody going to second that?
Chair,
Rob?
we're all reluctantly going to have to approve it. We just don't want to say that we want to approve it. My understanding is that if the council recommends to approve, that then the chair should move the council's motion. Yeah, okay, thank you.
I propose that we approve it. Has anybody going to second it? Right, can we have a vote for approval, please? Show of hands. 4. How many against, please? 3 against. And how many abstain? 2. So I think that adds up, doesn't it? So the recommendation is that we're going to approve the motion subject to the conditions that we're going to impose. And that's the end of this session, I think, for the second one. If everybody's finished, yeah? Anybody who's not associated with application 2, are we looking at doing application 3? Looking at time. Okay, then we're going to go for application number 3. If everybody leaves who don't want to be here, yeah? Is committee ready? So next one's application number 3, 25/00988/FUL. Change of use of vacant land to industrial storage, retrospective at land south of Quarry Garden Lane, Cadeby. Roy, the planning case officer, will introduce his item. Cheers, Roy.
Thank you, Chair. This application is being reported to Planning Committee at the request of Councillors Blott and Ransom, and there has also been significant public interest shown in the proposal. Oh, my slides have changed. Oh no, there we go. This application seeks retrospective planning permission for the change of use to industrial storage. The development on the site comprises a material change of use, including the storage of various materials, the siting of cabins, the erection of high fencing surrounding the site and fencing to create 6 internal divisions or yards, and the creation of a large storage area that has been used for the parking of HGVs and their trailers, and also including the raising of land levels through the importation of materials, the source of which is unknown. No detail has been provided within the application as to the nature of industrial storage. However, visits by the council have determined that the storage activities currently taking place on site relate to 3 of the yards storing old windows, 2 of the yards are storing old vehicles for dismantling, and 1 of the yards is storing timber. Appendix 6 of your report provides up-to-date photographic evidence collated by council officers from recent site visits. For the avoidance of doubt, moving forwards in this presentation, it is important for members to note that the proposed change of use application before you has no operational relationship to the main use of the site as a quarry. It is standalone and in no way ancillary to the main use of the quarry. So here is the aerial photograph of the site, just to give you some context. The site is marked there, is accessed via a long lane, garden lane, that comes off the residential area of Cadeby and traverses its way down the countryside before accessing the quarry and the application site. There was confusion at the point of the planning application submission, so I just wanted to make members aware in case they'd been looking at this under their own steam. The application as originally submitted was the red line plan shown on the screen here. However, on the 1st of December, the applicant, via their agent, submitted a revised site plan, which is the purple line on the screen here, which is, you will see from the later photographs, the area of the yards that have been created, the 6 yards that are doing all the storage. However, in reality, on the ground, as you will see from the photographic evidence, what has been built is much larger than the purple line and is in the approximate area of the green line. And that green line actually extends a bit further to the left, that takes in the remaining triangular area of what was previously woodland. The site itself is located within the green belt as defined by the Doncaster local plan. The green dash is the access route via Cadeby Village, past residential properties, and all the way down Garden Lane to access the site. The purple line, which is the slight deviation at the end of the route, is where the quarry vehicles would divert off from to enter the quarry operation down there. In terms of Greenbelt, and you've heard a bit about Greenbelt today, so I'm sure you're all rapidly becoming experts on Greenbelt, but in terms of Greenbelt designation, paragraph 7.4 of the report that you have before you details the considerations to be given to Greenbelt development for Planning Committee's consideration. In general, however, both the Council and the Government attach great importance to the protection of Greenbelt, the fundamental aim of which is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. Paragraph 7.6 provides the 5 principal purposes of Greenbelt, and if you note part 6, that is to safeguard the countryside from encroachment. National policy dictates that substantial weight is to be given to any harm to the Greenbelt, including harm to its openness. Inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the Greenbelt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances, which you've also heard about today. On this point, no very special circumstances have been presented by the applicant, and officers also do not consider there are any very special circumstances to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt. Just moving on, this is a aerial photo view of the site during the initial phases of the site becoming established. The yards have been established to the right-hand side of the purple polygon that I've imposed here in the area where there is some black imported materials, yet again source unknown, to level and raise the land. And it is important to note that the surrounding areas to the west, the north and the east of the application site, and you can probably just make it out, has been enclosed by a 2.4 metre high close board fence that creates security for the site. However, that is without planning permission and is part of the retrospective proposal. The site as built or as changed in terms of use and demarcated by the fencing is approximately 160 metres long and anywhere between 40 to 60 metres deep, and that equates to approximately 6,500 square metres in site area. This is a close-up view for members showing the storage yards that have been subdivided into the 6 yards, and the larger area to the right there is the green area, currently not being utilised. However, there has been previously, and there is elements of storage of vehicles and other activities on that site there. Members are asked to note that this, and you can probably get a feel for it from this photo, is a significantly raised area in the surrounding area. And from the flood risk assessment that has been supplied with the application, puts the site at approximately 22.5 metres AOD, compared to the nearby water bodies and the River Don, which are 7 metres AOD, so quite a large drop from this site down into the adjacent water bodies. Members need to be aware that no drainage plans have been supplied with the application to show how the storage use will be contained to prevent any leachate into the nearby water bodies and the groundwater, and this is exacerbated by the storage uses that are taking place on the site, such as dismantling cars and the potential for leaks of fuel and so forth into these water bodies. This is just showing you the site plan as submitted, showing the yards. I would just very briefly ask members just to look at Appendix 4 in your agenda pack, which is an aerial photographic regression exercise from Google Earth. I think the general thing to note there is seeing how the site has changed through time from 2009, when the application site was wooded and created important habitat and visual buffer, through to 2025, where there is none of that now, and we are just dealing with the development. That's important because here's just a quick map just to show you how important the site is from both an ecological and biodiversity point of view. The red line is approximately, the red circle, sorry, is approximately the site area, and you will see this area is absolutely surrounded by triple SIs. They are sites of special scientific interest, local wildlife sites, ancient woodland, and the red circle would have been in an area that would have been a connecting habitat between these important ecological habitats. And yet again, as you will see from your report, the ecologist notes that it is disappointing that no ecological information has been supplied with the application. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because I know it's been a long day for members, but it is just important to note that the site history is important to be aware of on this. This application site, although not ancillary or related to the quarry, does fall within the permission area for Cadeby Quarry. And that is a permission that was granted post-World War II, has gone through a mineral review with Doncaster Council, which was granted on the 29th of June 2012. And you will see there just a snippet of Condition 1 and Condition 42 of the mineral review permission. And Condition 1 notes that the site does need to be restored in accordance with an indicative scheme of restoration. And Condition 42, importantly, notes that upon completion of limestone extraction and the processing of all plant and machinery, buildings, hard standing and haul roads shall be removed from the site, and the site should be returned and restored back to how the restoration plan notes. I've just put on there the end date for the quarry, as is very common for all post-war quarries, does endure to the 14th of July 2048. But what needs to be members need to be aware of is that by that date, at the very latest, if not sooner, the site needs to be restored back to the landscape, the green belt, the countryside that it formerly was. This planning permission, if it was to be granted, would endure in this location because it is not related to the quarry. And I do think that is important for members. This is just a quick snippet of the restoration plan that I've extracted from the file. The purple area is the approximate site area of the storage, the change of use storage. It is important just for you to note these boxes on the, this is the indicative restoration plan, but with the eye of faith, I've just pulled out, just some of those boxes for you, and you will see key messages here, which is removal of buildings, reprofiling the land, planting trees and shrubs, expanding the woodland, and creating limestone grassland. It's very clear that this area is to be returned back to the Greenbelt countryside. Very finally, members, I'm just going to give you a quick tour of some of the site photos that have been provided by other colleagues who have visited the site. One of the most recent visits in the 27th of November. This is the storage that is being undertaken on this Greenbelt site. You can see the internal fencing that's been created in the yards. You can see the metal columns that have been driven into the ground, which are standing at a significant height, and further security fencing. And the black material on the floor is the black material you will have seen from the aerial photographs, which is some kind of engineering material, source unknown, that's been imported to reprofile and raise the site. This is an indication of some of the timber storage that's taking place on the site, and there's also a lot of vehicles parked within these areas as well. And this is just a long view up and down the site. In conclusion, members, in terms of the planning balance and conclusions. In terms of harms, this is a greenbelt site. No very special circumstances have been put forward to outweigh the substantial protection to the greenbelt. And it is important to note that the proposal is not ancillary to mining, and as such you can't argue that this is an ancillary use to the quarry, and therefore it wouldn't need to demonstrate any very special circumstances. This is clearly standalone. Other harms identified are the pollution risk that I've touched on, the biodiversity impact, and also the amenity impacts as well through increased HGV movements passing through residential areas to access this standalone application in addition to the quarry traffic that is also taking place. In terms of benefits, there is only considered to be limited employment benefit in terms of the people who are occupying the yards. I've already made it clear that substantial weight in your decision making needs to be given to the green belt, and obviously with the benefits being limited employment benefit, it is very hard to conclude that those harms outweigh the significant protection that should be afforded to the green belt, and therefore, members, the recommendation before you is to refuse planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Why has this even come to planning?
Bob, just 1 minute. Just. Sorry, Bob, what were you saying?
I'm just sort of asking why it's actually come to planning. Yeah. I mean, if you read everything here, it's just, I mean, they've not described what's going to be stored on there. Surely it should have been refused.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the intention was that this would have been refused under under officers' delegated powers. It's clearly an in principle refusal, and there are other harms. I am aware, however, well, it was called, I mean, technically, it was called in by the ward members for consideration by the planning committee. And that was on the back of basically the the ward members acting in their capacity to support the local residents who have been subjected to this unauthorised development for a significant period of time.
Right, Roy. A presentation on behalf of the residents in opposition is going to be presented by Roy.
Thank you, Chair. This might seem a bit unusual, but the person who did register to speak is unable to attend today, but they have asked me to read this out verbatim on their behalf, and also it's on behalf of the residents of Cadeby. So I'm just going to read it verbatim, members. This statement is being read on behalf of all the residents of Cadeby Village for whom I speak today. Cadeby is a small rural village. Our roads are narrow and we have very limited footpaths. To access the bus service, our residents, young and old, have to negotiate Cadeby Lane, a mile of unlit country road with no footpaths and a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit, and the only legitimate HGV access to the site via Garden Lane, which is narrow, accommodates resident on-street parking and is the home of residents, preschool, school and college, working, retired, able-bodied and disabled. The community would object to any development that causes any increase in traffic through the village, particularly goods vehicles. Firstly, can I express the residents' thanks to Mr. Roy Sykes for his excellent and very thorough report on the planning application under consideration. I will not waste everyone's time by repeating what Mr. Sykes has stated already, as he has covered very eloquently the residents' objections. I will, however, state that the operation of this site without planning permission, without planning consent, or the controls that can be applied with it have made the lives of residents hell for the last 12 months. The applicant has had no consideration whatsoever on the impact of their unauthorised development on the residents' lives, health and security, or wildlife, fauna and flora of the area. They have acted in a way that displays complete selfishness. Their associates have driven vehicles with no road tax, MOT, and therefore no insurance through the village on a regular basis, and have threatened residents with physical violence, arson, and criminal damage. The South Yorkshire Police have an open investigation into these criminal events. They have allowed operators of HGVs to use their site who are happy to drive on the footpaths in a dangerous and illegal way. One resident with limited mobility has given up her car and has stopped driving because of the dangerous traffic. The residents hope that the application will be refused and enforcement action taken quickly to have the site restored to its previous state. We also hope that no one else will try to establish any other business on it, and hope that City of Doncaster Council will closely monitor the area to prevent a reoccurrence of this dreadful situation. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we've received a request to speak from Councillor Oliver Blur, ward member in opposition to application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute your microphone when you have concluded your submission. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say to everyone, we've done this on behalf of the residents. If I ever believed that this situation would have happened 5 years later, because this didn't start 3 months ago, 6 months ago, where it would have gone through the normal planning officers, it's been 5 years that it's taken to get to this position, and I've luckily only been here for 6 months. Cynthia's been getting it for a hell of a lot longer than that. So I really appreciate the help that Roy's putting this report together, and I just hope that we can get a quick resolve to the enforcement on this side to get this to an end, because it's been absolute hell for the residents and me on a Saturday morning at 3 o'clock getting the emails from them. So hopefully with planning restrictions in place, however you vote today, this will come to an end. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions? No? Right. Officers, do you want to clarify anything for us before we go into debate? Anybody got any questions that they want to ask of the officers? Is there a proposal to refuse planning permission? Bob? Yarn, second it. Right, I move to the vote then. Please identify by raising your hand those in favour for refusal of this planning. So the application, or the respective application, has been refused. Item 6, appeal decisions. The report is for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this matter? No. Can I ask that the committee member move that the report be noted? Moved. Members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business at today's meeting. I would like to thank everyone for their attendance and input. I now declare the meeting closed.